Chapter 11:25. After solving the problem of not being able to win, Emperor Wu changed his weak attitude towards Empress Dowager Do and took the initiative to declare war on the Xiongnu. At the same time, he displayed his military talent, the Mai stratagem. Emperor Wu's attitude was very clear. The grasslands were very big, and he could not find you. However, he had to beat you, so he would let you beat him. Therefore, Emperor Wu lured the Xiongnu to invade Han territory and set the location of the final battle at Mai. To put it bluntly, if not for Emperor Wu's inexperience at the time and his lack of consideration of the problem, such as the military official Chanyu entering Han territory and seeing a herd of cows and sheep without any herders, he would not have become suspicious. If he did not become suspicious, he would not have captured the Han officials. If that Yinmen commandant had risked his life for the sake of the country instead of revealing the Mai stratagem to the military official Chanyu, then in this battle, Lu Che would have been able to defeat the Xiongnu, and there would not have been a full-scale war. If this battle had been successful, the Xiongnu would not have the capital to fight against the Han dynasty. Because in the following series of battles, the Han dynasty would have single-handedly suppressed the Xiongnu. The phrase, "the merciful do not command an army," was absolutely appropriate for Lu Che at this time. Of course, this kind of low-level mistake was a mistake that only a newbie would make. If Emperor Wu of Han had planned this battle, not to mention the military official Chanyu, even if all the Chanyu of the Xiongnu were added together, they would only be toyed around in the palm of Lu Che's hand. It was still the same saying, reality was reality. It was not a game that could be replayed after losing. Emperor Wu of Han paid the price for his mistake, which was the 44 years of all-out war between Han and Xiongnu. And this was only because of Emperor Wu's military talent, because the third factor was the most important. This was also the reason why Emperor Wu of Han was able to unite the Han dynasty under Empress Dowager Do's control and fight against the Xiongnu for his passion and unyielding spirit. During the Han-Xiong War, Lu Che opened up the western regions and established the famous Silk Road. Moreover, it was not like Qin Shi Huang who conquered the Six Kingdoms. He used more than 40 years to integrate the western regions into the Yan Huang Empire. At that time, all the countries in the western regions thought that they were part of the Great Han, even after the fall of the Western Han. This was because after the Eastern Han was established, the western regions quickly returned to the embrace of the Great Han. Many people thought that this was because the countries in the western regions were afraid of the Great Han's iron cavalry. Although this was a factor, it was more because Lu Che unified the culture and ideology of the countries in the western regions, making them feel that they were part of the Great Han from the bottom of their hearts. Even during the Three Kingdoms period at the end of the Eastern Han, Boss Chow unified the western regions more easily than he unified the Central Plains. Not only that, Emperor Wu of Han also reclaimed the Hushi Corridor and turned it into a horse racing ground for the Han dynasty. This was the reason why the Great Han dynasty's cavalry could dominate the world. Even in the world's hegemony at that time, only the noble Frost cavalry could compete with the Great Han dynasty's cavalry. However, the noble Frost Empire was originally a nomadic civilization, a people on horseback. From this, one could see how strong the Great Han dynasty's cavalry was. After solving the three problems that had to be solved in the war between an agricultural civilization and a nomadic civilization, it was the legendary life of Emperor Wu of Han. From the historical records, Emperor Wu of Han fought with the Xiongnu for 44 years. The territory expanded nearly doubled, but the population only decreased by 10%. This was also due to the fact that the landlords annexed the land and population. He also conquered the western region, opened up the Silk Road, and laid a solid foundation for the Yan Huang dynasty to become the Celestial Empire. Such a great emperor, even with Lin Yuan's current knowledge, could not help but be called a king of men. However, he was scolded for being militaristic for so many years. There were also people who compared Li Shimin, who was fooled by the Confucian sect and wrote the imperial norms, which was a shameful work for human kings, to Lu Che. They even felt that Li Shimin should be the greatest emperor of all time, surpassing the Qin emperor and Emperor Wu of Han. However, if one did not look at the Song dynasty scholars who forcefully flattered the Li Tang dynasty in order to cover up Wu Zetian's achievements, Li Shimin could only barely reach a passing level among the human kings. Not to mention the so-called greatest emperor of all time. Even the word great did not have anything to do with him. Another person who was praised as the Kaiyuan era, Li Longji. The biggest mistake in his life was that he died too late. His era was left behind by Wu Zetian. He would not be able to clean it up completely. After all, although Wu Zetian was the only empress and was criticized by others, if one understood the history, one would realize that this empress' achievements were only inferior to Qin Shi Huang and Ing Zheng. During the Wu Zhou dynasty, there were 26 kingdom wars and 21 victories. She even started the so-called Great Asian War. She used the strength of a single country to fight the 5 major countries of Asia. There were as many as 15 countries that participated in the war. As for Wu Zetian, she won 5 out of 5 battles and was called the top of the world. The other countries worked together to build a Wu Zhou Tianshu for her. At that time, all the kings of the various countries left their names on the Wu Zhou Tianshu. Wu Zhou was the strongest country in the world. It was comparable to the pillars of Ashoka and Trajan's achievement pillar. It was even taller than the other 2 achievement pillars. What was more terrifying was that the Wu Zhou dynasty did not spend a single cent to build the Wu Zhou Tianshu. It was built by the surrounding countries spontaneously, and then it was pushed down by Li Longji. More than 130 countries were so angry that they broke off relations with the Tang dynasty. Under the defamation of the Confucian sect, who claimed that they were connected to the heavens and were bestowed by the gods, but did not do it themselves and instead asked others to abide by the heavens and extinguish human desires, people like Qin Shi Huang, Han Wu, Sui Yang, and Wu Jiong, who had no qualms about Yan Huang and human kings, were all defamed miserably. Lin Yuan's war against the Xuanjin dynasty was based on Emperor Wu of Han's Mai strategy. He had never denied the terror of these cavalrymen on the grasslands. Even if they could not defeat the army of the northern region head-on, they could still make use of the mobility of cavalry to harass, attack, and even cut off the northern region's supplies, causing the northern region's army to be exhausted on the grasslands. That was why Lin Yuan would not take the initiative to attack the Frost Mirror Plains. It was not the right time. However, that did not stop him from copying homework. It was fine that the Tianwu world did not have a terrain like Mai. When Lin Yuan was building the Great Wall, he had already prepared this pass. He wanted to create an artificial Mai for the Xuanjin dynasty to use as a battlefield to kill them. As for the quality of the Northern Frontier Army, it was not a problem that they could not defeat the Xuanjin dynasty. It was only a matter of whether they were easy to defeat or not. Furthermore, Lin Yuan had learned from the experience of the human kings in his previous life. He first cleaned up the sects and aristocratic families. Only then did he plan to deal with the neighboring Xuanjin dynasty. Chapter 1126. Without the intervention of the aristocratic families and sects, Lin Yuan had the final say in the northern frontier. The Sky Demon, who had previously hindered Lin Yuan, had also lost contact with the Nether River Patriarch because the Patriarch of Yang Mei was guarding outside the heavenly gates. Thus, he had become a wandering ghost and was unable to affect the northern frontier. This could be considered as helping Lin Yuan to get rid of a major problem. In addition, Lei Fan, Su Yin, Luo Su, and the others have been exposed one after another. Under Li Xian's investigation, the Northern Restoration Society was also in a worse state day by day. It could be said that there were no internal and external troubles. Now he had also settled the relationship with the Hengduan mountain range. The decision-makers of the Chuyan dynasty had been wiped out, and the demon venerable of the southern wasteland had been severely injured. Furthermore, these two parties were now hated by the Hengduan mountain range. In a short period of time, they would not be able to affect the northern frontier. As for the Qinjiang dynasty, it was simply trembling in fear in this revolution that anyone with a discerning eye could see. After all, the dragon clan of the Four Seas behind them was still being suppressed by the demonic beasts of the outer sea. How would they have the time to care about them? At this time, It was obviously unrealistic for them to provoke the northern frontier. There were no internal and external troubles. Wouldn't they jump up and violently knock on the heads of these reckless barbarians in the Frost Mirror grassland? Therefore, the magically modified version of the Mai plot began to show its power under Lin Yuan's plan. The main forces of the Xuanzhan dynasty were first badly battered at the pass. Then, when the Blackwater army cleaned up the immortals and entered a state of encirclement through various transmission formations, the fate of these Xuanzhan barbarian was already decided. Lin Yuan did not need to consider the problem of whether he could defeat them or not. In fact, when the northern frontier was in a state where he had the final say, Lin Yuan did not need to consider the problem of whether it was worth it or not. However, such a matter could not be done this way. Now, those who gathered under Lin Yuan, in addition to the original people of the northern frontier and the immigrants of the Shunwu dynasty, there were also a large number of people who felt that they had some ability and wanted to fight for a future in the northern frontier. Otherwise, in 3 years of continuous battles, Lin Yuan was not a god. How could he ensure that the population under his rule was always in a state of growth? These people who gathered from various places to the northern frontier, after several rounds of screening, most of the people who were just there to make up the numbers were eliminated. The remaining people more or less had some ability. Whether it was going on a campaign or governing a place, there were some good seedlings. Although the northern frontier could not attract any sects to rely on, it was not inferior to sects and aristocratic families. Their cultivation realm might be low, but their ability was absolutely well developed. It should be known that the existence of a sect, unless it was supported by a particularly powerful sect headquarters, was composed of a few or a dozen aristocratic families. The so-called operating model of a sect was to select the talented children of these aristocratic families and send them to the sect to cultivate peacefully, providing the aristocratic families with protection in terms of martial strength. The resources needed for the operation of the sect were completely provided by these aristocratic families. Otherwise, Lin Yuan would not have said before that the sect should disintegrate into aristocratic families and enter the northern frontier. It should be known that even if the children of poor families or the lowest grassroots were really talented, there were very few who could enter a sect. Most of them would stop at being handymen. Those who could be selected as outer core disciples were already at the level of dragons and phoenixes among men. Therefore, it was basically impossible for a sect like the one in fantasy novels to exist. From a logical level of thinking, if it was not formed by a group of powerful aristocratic families, then it would be impossible to gather the resources needed to operate a sect. If you wanted to snatch the rice bowl of others, you would need to have the ability to do so, right? A group of unrelated people mixed together was not called a sect. It was called a gang, a mountain stronghold, or a guild. Strictly speaking, they belonged to the forest. But a sect was different. A sect was a real aristocratic identity. When the disciples of some powerful sects went to a place, even the local officials had to give them some face. But who had ever seen the officials give face to those local ruffians? After eliminating the idea of the aristocratic families being scattered to various places and allowing these aristocratic families to form sects to protect places, Li Zhong held the military and political power of the northern frontier firmly in his hands. The remaining aristocratic families, whether strong or weak, could only cooperate with the northern frontier. It was not a peaceful time now. Without the protection of martial strength, you would not even know how you died. But a high degree of centralization of power was not necessarily a good thing. For example, right now, the number of talents from all walks of life in the northern frontier had reached a saturation point. If it were not for the internship system, the northern frontier would have long since become redundant. Moreover, as talents from all over the world gathered at the northern frontier, the students of the Northern Frontier Academy graduated according to their qualifications. This was indeed a headache for Li Zhong. Therefore, expansion had become the most important thing. Sky Demon was not easy to deal with. Or it could be said that this group of bastards were like cows in sheep's clothing. They could be dealt with, but they were very difficult to eradicate. Therefore, they had to be dealt with last by Lin Yuan. At the very least, he had to form a team specifically to deal with Sky Demon. Therefore, there were not many options for Lin Yuan to choose from. Northern Frontier Prince's Mansion. Lin Yuan and Li Zhong looked at each other for a moment. Li Zhong squinted his eyes slightly and said in a deep voice, "Lord Dragon King, I don't really understand your plan. Expansion is an urgent matter for the northern region, but we can obviously choose a better plan, such as reclaiming the other territories of the Shenwu dynasty. First of all, we are in the right in terms of the law, so no one will be afraid of us. Second of all, we will have to deal with the otherworldly demons sooner or later, so it doesn't make much difference if we do it sooner or later. Why don't we take advantage of the fact that they have lost their command and launch a large-scale attack?" He paused and added, "Of course, we are very clear about the trouble that Sky Demon is in. Even if we don't deal with Sky Demon now, we can still choose to attack the Xinjiang Empire. If we go through the Hengduan Mountains, we can directly ignore their river defense line. If we fight on land, let alone the northern frontier, any one of the empires can directly beat them up. So, what is your suggestion?" Lin Yuan blinked and looked at Li Zhong playfully. "The Chuyan Empire." Li Zhong's face darkened as he said sternly. Seeing that Lin Yuan did not speak, Li Zhong quickly added, "The Xinjiang Empire is no match for us. Therefore, if we request to pass through, they will not ignore us. Moreover, the Chuyan Empire has shown goodwill to us and ceded a large territory to us. It is reasonable for us to attack and occupy the Chuyan Empire's territory now. Why do I have such a stupid brother?" Li Xian, who was wearing a silver flying fish robe and a black cloak, stopped standing at the side to act as a guard. He glanced at Li Zhong with disdain, then his face was filled with disappointment. Chapter 11:27. "I'm stupid." Li Zhong's expression changed. He growled, "What do you know? You better manage your Imperial Secret Service. Don't tell them what to do." Li Xian sneered and turned his head to the side. It seemed like he couldn't be bothered to debate with Li Zhong. Li Zhong turned his head back and said, "Your Majesty, I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart. The Frost Mirror Grassland is of little value to us. First of all, the climate of the Frost Mirror Grassland is changeable. During the day, it can steam people to death, and at night, the wind can freeze people into ice sculptures. There are poisonous insects and swamps everywhere. Moreover, it is impossible to build a city because the terrain of the grassland is constantly changing. Some places may be solid soil today, but the next day, they will be washed into swamps by the water. Some places may dry up from wetlands and become habitable. If we build a city, I'm afraid that it will collapse before the city is built." "Who said I'm going to build a city on the grassland?" Lin Yuan was slightly startled. He looked at Li Zhong helplessly. Li Zhong wasn't stupid. On the contrary, he was very smart. He could handle all kinds of government affairs in the northern frontier with ease. Even if he was involved in some unfamiliar areas, he could quickly grasp them and make the most beneficial decisions for the northern frontier. However, he was too steady, so steady that it was frightening. What kind of brain circuit did he have to think of building a city on the grassland? If a city could be built on the grassland, what would be the point of those nomadic civilizations? Besides, the northern frontier's gathering place wasn't built like a city. The relationship between the northern frontier and the Hengduan mountain range had always been good. Those monsters wouldn't rashly attack the northern frontier. Under such circumstances, the northern frontier didn't need a city wall to protect the gathering place at all. The northern frontier's army wouldn't be afraid of anyone in the field. Even if it was a monster, the northern frontier's army would bite off a piece of flesh. The reason why he built the northern frontier's Great Wall wasn't because he couldn't defeat the Frost Mirror Barbarian in the field, but because the Frost Mirror Barbarian's mobility was still there. No one could ignore it. In addition, the northern frontier didn't have a city wall. Once they bypassed the northern frontier's army, it would be a disaster for the ordinary people living in the northern frontier. "Lord Dragon King, I know that the northern frontier doesn't build a city wall, but you should also know that the grassland and the northern frontier can't be compared. The northern frontier's geographical environment is like mountains and rivers. Even if there aren't any conspicuous cities, people won't get lost. However, The grassland is an endless expanse of green grass mixed with a large number of wetlands that can't be walked on. The climate is also extremely bad. It's very difficult to cross the grassland without preparation. Even if you have a map, it's easy to get lost. What's more terrifying is that once you get lost in the grassland, you'll basically starve to death, freeze to death, or even be poisoned to death by those poisonous insects. Unless you're extremely lucky, you'll die before you find the tribes on the grassland. If you still maintain the policy of the northern frontier and don't build cities on the grassland, unless you're willing to pay a huge price to train people who are familiar with the grassland's terrain and prepare guides for every team that goes to the grassland will be a land of death for us. Li Zhong took a deep breath and felt a slight pain in his temples. He said, "You know the financial situation of the northern frontier. The tax rate can be said to be extremely low. It's already good enough that it can barely operate. The research and construction of the Ministry of Works are all relying on the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. Now that the northern frontier needs to feed more and more people, the market is becoming more and more saturated. Our financial problems have to be solved. Before that, I absolutely won't agree to you continuing to expand your expenditure. That's why I said you're stupid." Li Exan crossed his arms in front of his chest and sneered again. Seeing that Lin Yuan didn't speak and being provoked by Li Exan again and again, Li Zhong suddenly slammed the table and stood up, roaring angrily. "I told you to shut up. Don't you get it? You want me to cut the Imperial Secret Service's budget by half in the second half of the year, and you'll be happy, right?" "Huh?" Li Exan sneered, squinted his eyes, and said, "It's a waste to choose you as the king of the northern frontier. You're good at defending, but not good at attacking. Can't you look further? For example, what if the Dragon King's goal isn't the Frost Mirror grassland, but to use it as a springboard to attack the Deadwood dynasty? If you rethink your plan, the situation will still be the same, and the Frost Mirror grassland will be useless, right?" Li Zhong was choked by Li Exan's words, but he didn't refute immediately. Instead, he simulated the map in his mind, and then opened his eyes to look at Li Exan. He licked his lips and was speechless for a moment. What kind of F***king brain is this? We haven't even conquered the Frost Mirror grassland, and we're already thinking about attacking the Deadwood dynasty? After waiting for a while, seeing that Lin Yuan didn't say anything, Li Zhong turned to look at Lin Yuan blankly and said in a deep voice, You can't really think like that, right? Lord Dragon King, the Frost Mirror grassland isn't useless. I have other uses for this region, but Li Xin is right. I want to use the Frost Mirror grassland as a springboard to attack the Deadwood dynasty. This is our next phase of the strategic deployment. The corners of Lin Yuan's mouth opened, revealing a ferocious smile. After being hit by Lin Yuan, Li Zhong immediately leaned back. His eyes were filled with shock. That's why I said you're really stupid. Why don't you think about it? There are so many people in the Frost Mirror grassland. Why don't we accept these people to contribute to the northern frontier when we have an absolute victory? Why do we let the Hungduan mountain range's demon beasts run amok in the Frost Mirror grassland while we attract the Shuangjian dynasty's main forces? Li Xian looked at Li Zhong with a grin and said with a hideous smile, Since the Dragon King made this deployment, he never wanted to take the Frost Mirror grassland, let alone leave those barbarians alive. Think about it. After some time, when the news of the Frost Mirror grassland's main forces being wiped out reaches the grassland, and the Hungduan mountain range's demon beasts are slaughtering the barbarians, where will those Shuangjian barbarian go? Gulp! Li Zhong swallowed his saliva. His face was a little pale, as if he was frightened by the speculation in his heart. The sudden attack of the Hungduan mountain range's demon beasts will definitely catch the Shuangjian barbarian off guard. At that time, what they will have to do is to resist the slaughter of the demon beasts. However, don't forget that the Dragon King promised those demon beasts that the demon beast tide attacking the Frost Mirror grassland this time will not be the small fries in the periphery. Every clan will send out their elites. With the remaining strength of those tribes, they will definitely not be able to contend against these demon beasts. Therefore, they can only escape. To the north is the Hungduan mountain range. To the south is the area controlled by the Sky Demon, and to the west is our northern frontier. They definitely won't dare to go to these three places. Therefore, they can only escape. Li Xian still had a hideous smile on his face. Chapter 1128. Li Zhong pondered for a moment and realized that was indeed the case. He was not an argumentative person. As long as there was no problem with logic, he would not ask questions like, "Why are you so sure?" Since the northern frontier was established, the Xuanjin dynasty had fought 2 wars with the northern frontier. In both wars, the Xuanjin dynasty was the one that was annihilated. Therefore, no matter how bold the Xuanjin dynasty barbarians were, they would not continue to flee to the northern frontier when they had nowhere else to go. To them, it was a path of certain death. The Great Wall of the Northern Territory wasn't just for show. It was a defensive facility that even their main army and regular army couldn't defend against. If the Northern Territory decided to shut itself in, they could only wait for their deaths at the foot of the Great Wall of the Northern Territory. That was why it was better for them to run to the Witherwood dynasty from the start. Intelligent life forms all sought advantages and avoided disadvantages. This was an indisputable fact. The Xuanjin dynasty had never won a battle against the northern frontier. The Xuanjin dynasty had never lost a battle against the Witherwood dynasty. Or rather, it could not be said that they had never lost a battle. After all, the Xuanjin barbarian would invade the borders every year, just like how they had to deal with the beast tide every year. The Xuanjin barbarian did not care at all. The things that the Xuanjin barbarian stole every year were not even enough to cover the cost of dispatching an army. Therefore, they turned a blind eye to it. However, at this time, it was a clear psychological hint. Only death awaited them if they went to the northern frontier, but there was still a chance of survival if they went to the Witherwood dynasty. Therefore, a large number of Xuanjin barbarian would definitely swarm into the Witherwood dynasty, and they would be able to reach the Frost Mirror grassland in an instant. The Witherwood dynasty would not ignore these exiled Xuanjin barbarian either. After all, the 2 sides were mortal enemies. It was fine if it was a small-scale Xuanjin barbarian, but if so many Xuanjin barbarians suddenly swarm in, the Witherwood dynasty would have to be crazy not to exterminate them. At this time, the army of the northern frontier was marching toward the Frost Mirror grassland. They could still use the excuse of exterminating the demon beasts. In addition, Lin Yuan had negotiated with the Hengduan Mountains. The army of the northern frontier could be said to be unstoppable. Even if they ran into a demon beast army, the army of the northern frontier would most likely avoid them. The army of the Xuanjin dynasty was not fighting the Xuanjin barbarian. No demon beast clan dared to send their elites to clash with the army of the northern frontier, especially at this juncture where the demon beast master selection was taking place. Once the army of the northern frontier passed through the Frost Mirror grassland, the rest of the story was very simple. Faced with the tight defensive line of the Witherwood dynasty, even if the army of the northern frontier could penetrate it, they would have to pay a heavy price. However, in reality, in order to surround and intercept the Xuanjin barbarian, the army of the Witherwood dynasty would definitely mobilize most of the troops to guard the border. After all, they would never expect the northern frontier to attack them. Penetrating such a defensive line was a piece of cake for the army of the northern frontier. After passing through the border that was easy to defend and difficult to attack, they would be like tigers entering a flock of sheep. They would be able to devour large amounts of territory in the blink of an eye. Not only would they be able to generate a huge amount of income for the northern frontier, but they would also be able to solve the employment problem of a considerable portion of the talents on the northern frontier. Li Zhong rubbed his forehead and said in disbelief, "I understand the logic, but why the Witherwood dynasty? After all, there was no reason to attack a dynasty. What was the difference between the Azure River dynasty and the Witherwood dynasty? On the other hand, attacking the Witherwood dynasty might seem easy, but in reality, it would lengthen the battle line of the northern frontier. It was very likely that it would be difficult to take care of both the front and the rear. This would undoubtedly increase the difficulty of the battle for supremacy on the northern frontier." "Are you stupid? Are you stupid? Tell me, are you stupid?" Li Xian sneered with a mocking expression on his face. "That's enough. Can you show some respect to your elder brother?" Li Zhong slammed his hand on the stone table in front of him again. He looked like he was about to have a brain hemorrhage. "I'm just speaking the truth. First, you have to be clear about one thing. The seven great empires have occupied the sky martial continent for close to 10,000 years. Even if we exclude the guardian of the gate of heaven and the other hidden powers, in these 10,000 years, the seven great empires will have produced countless shocking geniuses. With the accumulation of this foundation, it will be an extremely terrifying force. I've traveled around the seven empires in the past, learning various knowledge and experiencing various occupations. So my understanding of the seven empires far surpasses your elder brother, who only knows how to read books. I can even guarantee that once the seven empires are united, even the Heaven's Gate protectors will have no choice but to avoid them, let alone the northern frontier that has been established for less than 3 years. Of course, if our Dragon King is willing to be a puppet and allow the aristocratic families, sects, various guilds, and chambers of commerce to grow, then the seven empires will naturally not be united. The ones who will deal with us will be the aristocratic families of the seven empires, the relatives of the royal family, and the armies they control. As long as it's not an all-out war, our northern frontier will not be weak in a one-on-one battle. But the problem is, in the Dragon King's ruling style, there has never been a place for sections. Even the aristocratic families have to obediently abide by the rules set by the northern frontier to exist. Once they break the rules, it will be a disaster, not to mention the existence of those guilds and chambers of commerce. None of them will be able to surpass the association of the Demon Emperor and the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce when they're in power in the northern frontier. So if they're left alone, there will only be two results. Either they disband on the spot, or they'll be eaten up by the northern frontier. In such a situation, the northern frontier will not only have to face the ruling class of an empire, but also the entire world. Li Xian put his hands behind his back with an arrogant look on his face. He grinned and said, "However, our Dragon King has cleverly made use of one thing, which is the inertia of history. In other words, in the Dragon King's plan, our threat must be the least." Wasn't this T? Li Zhong really wanted to spit at Li Xian's face. The northern frontier's threat level was small. How if King small could it be? Anyone who wasn't an idiot would know that the structure of the seven empires in the Tianwu continent was already set in stone. However, after the northern frontier began to grow wild, this structure was broken. When the Xinwu dynasty was still in existence, the northern frontier had already shown its prowess. They even openly sent troops to occupy the north, standing against the Xinwu dynasty across the Wei River. Now, they were indifferent to the land occupied by the Sky Demon, and they were attacking the Frost Mirror grassland. This clearly broke the rules and informed the other empires that the unchanging structure had changed. From now on, all the powers would enter a stage of reshuffling. And why would the northern frontier, who had broken all this, become the least threatening of all the independent powers? Chapter 11:29. At this time, you must be thinking that the one who broke the rules was the northern frontier. So no matter how many ambitious people jump out, the northern frontier will inevitably become the target of public criticism. Why would the northern frontier become the one with the least threat in this chaotic world? Li Xian looked as if he had the pearl of wisdom in his hands. He glanced at Li Zhong's unsightly expression and continued, "This is a strategy that you have never been involved in, so you can't understand. I call it constraining oneself." Li Zhong was speechless. After a short pause in his brain, Li Zhong's expression suddenly changed, revealing a hint of shock. The situation of the seven great empires dividing the Tianwu continent had not changed for nearly 10,000 years. But this did not mean that the seven great empires had always carried out the transfer of power smoothly. There was no lack of vassal kings entering the capital to seize power, and powerful officials ascending to the throne to rule the world. However, no one had done it as thoroughly as Lei Qiuxing, even changing the name of the dynasty, turning the original Wanjian dynasty into the Xinwu dynasty. In fact, the imperial family did not change, but the change in power was just a game between the imperial family, the aristocratic families, and the sections. The so-called imperial family was the most powerful aristocratic family in the world. When a family or sex strength surpassed the imperial families, they would naturally be able to control the power. However, as the imperial family's strength increased, or the strength of other powerful officials increased, the power would quickly fall to someone else. This was also a way for the imperial family to pacify the various factions. However, the northern frontier obviously would not play this game. Li Zhong glanced at Lin Yuan beside him, and an obscure light flashed in his eyes. He could see that his immediate superior did not respect divine authority. It could even be said that he was rather disgusted with the idea of divine authority. Furthermore, some of the ideas could not be said to be bad, but compared to the two sets of laws of the other empires, the new laws of the northern frontier were obviously too mild. This did not conform to the idea of using heavy laws in troubled times. However, he would not directly bring it up, because as of now, there was not much problem in the northern frontier. Although everyone, including Lin Yuan himself, did not like the idea of divine authority, compared to those miscellaneous methods, the current northern frontier was more stable. Especially after the bloody examples of the previous two northern frontier kings and a series of northern frontier elders, everyone knew who to listen to in the northern frontier. Most of the time, what seemed to be a sure-win situation was not really a sure-win situation. Even when you thought you were going to make a killing move, the other party could simply block you to the side or even counterattack you. Naturally, there was no need to mention the aspect of governance. The Shifter Emperor Association had the authority to directly report to the Dragon King, and no one dared to do anything under the supervision of the Shifter Emperor Association. Furthermore, with the embroidered uniform guards supervising the officials at all levels, especially under the control of Li Xian, such supervision was not as simple as just official matters. Even what some officials said or ate when they returned home would be recorded by the embroidered uniform guards hidden in the dark. Regarding this, Li Xian also had a very reasonable explanation. After all, Luo Su and the previous batch of people under the protection of the embroidered uniform guards had carried out these shady activities in private. As long as they had a clear conscience, why would they resist the supervision of the embroidered uniform guards? However, after leaving these links, the current situation in the northern frontier was no longer something that Li Zhong could control. He was indeed not very good at military matters, and he also knew his own limits, so he would not casually give orders. However, when this strategy of restricting oneself was placed in front of him, Li Zhong could not help but hold his breath. The northern frontier currently had the qualifications to occupy all of the Xinwu dynasty's territory in name. Even if there were post-war reconstruction, recuperation, and other projects that needed to be done for the current Tianwu continent that was close to saturation, this was not a big problem. There were people who could not survive in their birthplace, or people who could not make use of their strengths due to the saturation of resources, and were waiting to migrate to the northern frontier. More importantly, there were no sects in the northern frontier. The Shifter Emperor Association and the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce had also been cleansed, and those aristocratic families were now extremely obedient. There was no such thing as land annexation or keeping private slaves. Furthermore, all the land was nationalized. Even if the northern frontier set a ridiculously low tax rate, the combined income was enough to hang up the imperial courts of the other empires. The potential of the northern region was there for all to see. This was something that almost everyone knew. However, Lin Yuan and Li Xian's confidence had forced Li Zhong to think about this strategy carefully. After thinking about it carefully for a moment, he really understood something. Why the Witheredwood Empire? The Frost Mirror grassland was in between the two. To any farming civilization, the Frost Mirror grassland was of little value. Unless it was the Frost Mirror barbarians who were used to living in the grassland, the people of the other empires who migrated to the Frost Mirror grassland would not be able to acclimatize. Therefore, the Frost Mirror grassland was of little value to the northern frontier, especially since they could only be nomads and could not produce any important resources. Not to mention that there was not much land suitable for farming. There was simply no land suitable for farming. In the past, the Xuanzhen dynasty would only eat meat like demonic beasts. They would only trade with the caravans of other empires if their bodies could not take it anymore. All kinds of crops were sold to the Shuangjian dynasty at sky-high prices. Therefore, Li Zhong did not know what use the frost mirror grassland would be to Lin Yuan for the time being. He only knew that if Lin Yuan handed the frost mirror grassland to him, it would be a complete mess. What was even more terrifying was that the Withered Wood Empire was the complete opposite of the Northern Frontier's governing philosophy. The Withered Wood Empire's royal family was originally from a sect. They established their country through martial arts and dominated the world. They were invincible in the Withered Wood Empire. After establishing their country, they began to cultivate sects and the clans under them. Instead of saying that the Withered Wood Empire was an imperial court, it was more accurate to say that they were the most powerful sect in the Withered Wood Empire. It was evident how difficult it was for the Northern Frontier to conquer the Withered Wood Empire and implement the governing philosophy of the Northern Frontier. Li Zhong thought about it carefully. If he did not find anything wrong, he might not be able to see the Withered Wood Empire completely become a territory of the Northern Frontier, even if he served for the rest of his life as the king of the Northern Frontier. If he did not attack the Qian Empire, the Qingjiang Empire, and the Xinwu dynasty did not want to take over the Frost Mirror grassland, then use it as a springboard to attack the Withered Wood Empire, which had no conflict with the Northern Frontier, but just could not get along with. Such an action was almost perfectly avoiding all the correct answers. Chapter 1130. However, the problem was that Lin Yuan and Li Xian were obviously not fools. Both of them were very optimistic about this strategy. Didn't that mean I'm the fool? TSK. Li Zhong's expression immediately became awkward. However, if he thought about it from another perspective, the choice of policy almost determined the fate of an empire. This time was no exception. The destruction of the Shuangjian dynasty could be said to be certain. Under such circumstances, no matter what Lin Yuan did, he would break the situation of the seven empires segregating the Tianwu continent. It had to be said that after this terrifying and hateful incident, many ambitious people would emerge from the various empires, wanting to show off their strength. After all, the Xinwu dynasty was a very strange place. First, Lei Qiuxing appeared and accomplished the impossible, overthrowing the Wanjian dynasty's rule and becoming the new nobleman of the seven empires. Then, in less than 100 years, the Northern Frontier's Black Jiao appeared. When these two unrelated incidents were put together, it was enough for those ambitious people to see the decay and decline of the empires. Moreover, there was Lei Qiuxing and Lin Yuan. They perfectly proved that imperial power was not unshakable. As long as one had enough strength, anyone could create a new empire. Therefore, an extremely terrifying, chaotic world was about to be set off. Then the question was, who would be the thorn in the side in this chaotic world? What about the thorn in the side? It would undoubtedly be the Northern Frontier that broke the rules. Therefore, Li Zhong could say with certainty that once the Northern Frontier took over the Qingjiang dynasty or the Qian dynasty's territory, the Northern Frontier would quickly become the target of public criticism. Regardless of whether it was a chaotic world or not, the other empires would join forces to attack the Northern Frontier. Just like in Lin Yuan's previous life, during the Three Kingdoms War, even the Yellow Turban Uprising that swept the world could not shake the supreme imperial power. However, Dong Zhuo, who only led 3,000 cavalrymen into Luoyang, trampled on the imperial power, resulting in the chaotic end of the Eastern Han dynasty. However, before the chaotic war, it was an indisputable fact that the 18 Warlords Alliance in the Eastern Pass attacked Dong Zhuo. Now, the Northern Frontier was Dong Zhuo, who had trampled on the imperial power. Once he showed signs of swallowing the world, the various empires would form an alliance to suppress the Northern Frontier under the instigation of ambitious people. Therefore, the choice of the Northern Frontier was very important. Should they attack the Qingjiang dynasty or the Qian dynasty and lay the foundation for the Northern Frontier's hegemony? Or should they choose to punish themselves and rapidly weaken the Northern Frontier's potential threat to the various empires and let these ambitious people kill each other? Or let them deal with their own internal conflicts first? Putting the most difficult opponent at the front is a very foolish decision. However, for the current Northern Frontier, Putting the most difficult opponent at the front is the best choice. This is called a concrete analysis of the problem. More importantly, Li Zhong, you have to change your previous way of thinking. You can't just do whatever is beneficial to the northern frontier. As the king of the northern frontier, you have to think from a macro level about how to slow down the development of the northern frontier and reduce the wariness of the other factions. Lin Yuan, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke. At the same time, he interrupted Li Zhong's train of thought. After a pause, Lin Yuan continued, "War is a closed loop. It's divided into the production of resources, the allocation of resources, the consumption of resources, and the plundering of resources. I don't need an all-rounder to do everything. I've said before that if you become the king of the northern frontier, I'll make you a virtuous king in everyone's hearts. So there are many things you don't need to do. You just need to maintain the persona you set up when you reformed the northern frontier and carry out a series of construction and reforms on the northern frontier, as well as allocate the appropriate resources to the appropriate places. That's your mission. As for how to consume these resources and plunder more resources, that's what the generals and advisors of the northern frontier need to think about." Virtuous king? Li Zhong licked his lips. For a moment, he didn't know how to reply. This was because Li Zhong was behind the series of reforms on the northern frontier. His image in the eyes of others was hard to say, but in the eyes of the people of the northern frontier, Li Zhong was like a saint. Bearing such a persona, one could imagine the pressure Li Zhong was under. Therefore, Li Zhong could be said to have poured his heart and soul into all the government affairs of the northern frontier. Even during his rest time, he was constantly reviewing, fearing that there was something wrong with his settings that needed to be modified or supplemented. In other words, you're meddling too much. You just have to take care of the northern frontier, and that's it. Li Xian glanced at Li Zhong and very bluntly translated, "Shut up." Li Zhong glared at Li Xian, somewhat embarrassed and annoyed. Of course, he knew what Lin Yuan and Li Xian meant. They didn't despise him for meddling in everything. They were just giving him a clear warning. The northern frontier wasn't a small place like a county or prefecture. As time passed, the foundation of the northern frontier would grow bigger and bigger. Li Zhong could still meddle in all the government affairs now because he was so capable. But in the future, Li Zhong might not have the ability to manage the entire northern frontier by himself. Therefore, he had to give some authority appropriately and try to trust the officials who graduated from the Northern Frontier Academy. At the same time, he shouldn't meddle in those areas that he wasn't familiar with. He shouldn't act first and report later. Just like this time, in Li Zhong's eyes, Lin Yuan's strategic deployment was obviously dragging the northern frontier back. However, Li Zhong only gave his opinion. He didn't go against it and attack the Qinjiang Empire and the Qian Empire. Without a doubt, Li Zhong actually had this ability. Because when Lin Yuan was in the Endless Sea, Li Zhong was in charge of all the military affairs at the northern frontier. Fortunately, it was all defensive battles. There wasn't a chance for Li Zhong to take action personally. Otherwise, once the various parties were ready to make decisions, no matter what Lin Yuan's plan was, they could only follow Li Zhong's arrangements. But on the other hand, was it wrong for Lin Yuan to first attack the Kumu dynasty to restrain him? Of course not, because no matter how they avoided it, the Kumu Empire was a strong enemy that they would have to face sooner or later. The difference between attacking earlier and later was that once Lin Yuan's plan was executed, everyone would think that the northern frontier was stupid. They would also unknowingly let down their guard against the northern frontier. Before attacking the northern frontier, they would have to solve their own internal conflicts first. Only then would they have the capital to fight for the throne. This was Lin Yuan's goal. From a tactical perspective, Lin Yuan was dragging him back. However, from a strategic perspective, Lin Yuan suddenly pulled the northern frontier out of the chaos that was to come. He went from being the most outstanding duke to being the least threatening duke. Chapter 1131. Thank you for your advice. Li Zhong sincerely saluted Lin Yuan. To be honest, he really didn't have any dissatisfaction in his heart. Although Li Xian's words were a bit unpleasant and somewhat disrespectful to his elder brother, this was indeed his own problem. If it were anyone else, they would have some dissatisfaction with his behavior. It could even be said that because of Li Zhong's existence, those outstanding graduates of the Northern Frontier Academy almost didn't have any chance to personally handle government affairs after being assigned to the Northern Frontier Prince's Mansion. The nominal leaders of the various yamen had all become mere decorations. Basically, they were just assistants and running errands. It would be a lie to say that they were satisfied with the current situation. To put it bluntly, those who could graduate from the Northern Frontier Academy and be assigned to the Prince's Mansion as an intern were basically favored by God. No matter how talented they were in cultivation, they had no problem handling all kinds of government affairs. But to put it bluntly, these people were just waiting to die under Li Zhong's hands, doing nothing meaningful. In addition to high positions and high salaries in the Northern Frontier, their reputation in the Northern Frontier was even lower than that of the interns with average grades who were assigned to various yamen. This also led to these outstanding graduates being jokingly called the Prince's Mansion Staff Group, or something like that. This was no small matter. The Northern Frontier Academy's enrollment standards were not very strict, but compared to the academic system in Lin Yuan's previous life, the Northern Frontier Academy emphasized the apprenticeship system, which meant that the academy taught you all kinds of courses and practical tricks. When you felt that you were qualified to graduate, you could directly apply to the instructor in charge of teaching you. The instructor would arrange some exams for you, and if the exams were successful, you could graduate. At the same time, according to the exam results, you would be assigned to different places for internships. It was conceivable that under such a system, students who could quickly finish all kinds of courses and graduate smoothly, and also achieve excellence in all aspects, and be directly sent to the Northern Frontier Prince's Mansion for internship in the Northern Frontier, the highest institution in the Northern Frontier, were of a high standard. Such a group of people, you let them just wait to die and run errands? Do you think they have any thoughts of killing people? They worked hard to cram in all kinds of knowledge and graduate before most people. Wasn't it just for a good future? In the end, they even took off their pants, and this is what you showed them? Therefore, Li Zhong could be regarded as a strange man. His reputation could be said to be polarizing. In the eyes of the commoners, Li Zhong was a living sage that was hard to come by. In the eyes of the academy's students, Li Zhong was a monster who suppressed them and didn't allow them to stand out. Lin Yuan didn't have hands. If he had hands, he really wanted a hand. His head really hurt. What kind of freaks gathered in the Northern Frontier? In the military, there was Li Zhongxing, who had all kinds of military knowledge but only knew how to do things according to the book. Occasionally, there would be a crazy freak. There was Li Xian, who learned a lot of theories but was only interested in intelligence agencies. Now, his reputation in the Northern Frontier was enough to make children stop crying. As for the civil officials, there was also Li Zhong, who could be said to be all-round, but a little too steady. He didn't want to do anything that didn't benefit him. He felt that he could do anything, so he simply finished everything and didn't give anyone a chance to stand out. Birds of a feather flocked together. Lin Yuan now often wondered if there was something wrong with him. What kind of freaks were under his command? And in the Prince's Mansion in the Northern Frontier, when the big shots representing the supreme, the royal power, and the supervision were confiding in each other. In the distant battlefield of the Northern Frontier, cruel massacres were also rapidly erupting and ending. During the Spring and Autumn Warring States period, the Great Qin Empire had swept through the 6 countries, relying on all kinds of black technology. For example, a large number of military products were unearthed from Emperor Qin's tomb. Among them, the crossbows could be said to be standard, and the degree of error was so small that it made people's hair stand on end. All kinds of crossbows even had aiming devices that could be used until the end of the cold weapons era. Even more exaggerated was the terrifying shooting range of the Qin crossbows. Not to mention the Warring States period. Even if one moved back to the Eastern Han Dynasty, there might not be many crossbows that could compare with it. And Lin Yuan's Ministry of Works in the Northern Frontier had taken this aspect of black technology to the extreme. In the Tianwu world, where cultivation and technology were both bright, he had perfectly integrated all kinds of knowledge that he had come into contact with in his previous life, creating a series of black technologies as well as military strategies that were not very popular in this world. Under such circumstances, Unless an outside power directly attacked the northern frontier without declaring war, there was no way the northern frontier would be at a disadvantage. Otherwise, the northern frontier would not fall into a disadvantage in any battle. For example, the gunpowder buried under the mountain pass had directly buried all the blood Liao cavalry that had been gathered. It did not seem to have much effect. After all, there were not many blood Liao cavalry that had accompanied the army on this expedition. In addition, when the Shuangjian dynasty's allied army had been defeated, many of the blood Liao cavalry had disappeared. Thus, in terms of killing the enemy, it could be said that the gunpowder was completely wasted. This was the first time Lin Yuan's magically modified gunpowder had made an appearance in battle, so it was somewhat unsatisfactory. But in terms of strategy, in such a battle, all of the blood Liao cavalry that could still be gathered had been wiped out. After losing these heavy cavalry, what awaited the Shuangjian dynasty was the relatively invincible dragon cavalry of the northern frontier, as well as the Black Water Army's formation that their warhorses could not penetrate. There was no doubt that the Shuangjian dynasty's army had not only lost in this battle, but they had also fallen into a situation where they were unable to fight back and were heavily surrounded by the army of the northern frontier. This was too terrible. Some of the khans of small and medium-sized tribes did not even dare to close their eyes at night. After all, there was no way to break the deadlock before them. Even if they sent out elite warriors, it would be meaningless. If they could not even penetrate the enemy's formation, how could they possibly break out of the encirclement? So what if they were in the airborne realm, heavenly strength realm, or nethervoid realm? Did they think that there was not a single cultivator in the northern frontier? According to the original organization of the Seven Dynasties, the composition of the army of the northern frontier could definitely be regarded as extravagant. No dynasty dared to say that they could cultivate an army like the northern frontier. Not only were they all cultivators from top to bottom, but what was even more terrifying was that all of them were at least in the airborne realm. This was simply unreasonable. In the armies of other dynasties, airborne realm cultivators were at least at the level of mid-level officers. However, in the army of the northern frontier, they were at the level of soldiers. Compared to the armies of other dynasties, which were mostly made up of mortal evolution realm cultivators, the comprehensive combat power of the army of the northern frontier was almost at a crushing level. Chapter 1132. Regardless of whether it was Shenlin Jun or the Shueliao Knights, why were they able to become ace troops? Firstly, their standard equipment was basically 1 or 2 generations ahead of other troops. Unless they encountered other ace troops, they were practically invincible. Secondly, the techniques that they cultivated were carefully selected by their respective dynasties and were the most suitable techniques for them. Although they were not as terrifying as Lin Yuan's universal scripture, they were not too far off. Thirdly, the most important issue was resources. With the support of a dynasty behind them, they were simply not as tyrannical as aristocratic families and factions. Of course, if it was the kind of faction or aristocratic family that was overseen by the Heavenly Gates Guardian, they would not lose by too much. They would probably have a 40-60 ratio. With this level of resources, not to mention a group of carefully selected geniuses, even a group of pigs could be nurtured into martial Tian Peng. Furthermore, for any dynasty, ace troops could not be used as firefighters. They would only be mobilized when the situation was truly critical and they had no choice but to be mobilized. Only then would they receive orders to go into battle. For example, when the northern frontier had just been established according to the military organization of the Xinwu dynasty, other than the border troops that could not be mobilized to defend against the Shuangjian dynasty, Shenlin Jun of Wei River City was the closest to the northern frontier. Based on the power of the northern frontier at that time, not to mention Shenlin Jun's official troops, even if they dragged out 300,000 reserve troops, they would be able to directly overturn the entire northern frontier. However, in reality, Lei Qiuxing had no intention of mobilizing Shenlin Jun. Instead, he had mobilized troops from the southern coastal areas and even spent money to hire a large number of mercenaries to expand the troops. In a situation where there was no run-in, this was no different from a new army. Why? Was Lei Qiuxing a fool with a lot of money? That was obviously impossible. Every dynasty's trump card army was the most powerful weapon in the royal family's hands. Their existence was more of a deterrent. No king would be foolish enough to send his trump card troops to fight fires everywhere, unless it was a team like the Yun Tiger soldiers, which relied purely on equipment and secret techniques. Furthermore, they had to fight in mountainous and swampy terrains. Otherwise, they were not much stronger than an ordinary army. Their comprehensive ability was completely incomparable to Shun Lin Jun, the Blackwater Army, and the Blood Liao Knights. As long as they did not use secret techniques to reduce their lifespan, instead of calling them soldiers, it would be better to call them the most talented cultivators in the royal family. Their mission was to cultivate in seclusion, spar, and constantly improve their cultivation base and combat ability. The more powerful they were, the more powerful the dynasty would be. But the northern frontier was different. If you asked the northern frontier to bring over 1 million troops, the northern frontier would definitely have no problem. Not only would the quality of the troops be good, but the level of their equipment would even be better than the other dynasty's trump card troops. However, if the northern region were to recruit mercenaries, itinerant cultivators, low-grade cultivators, and the like the other dynasties, the northern region would be stretched to the limit if they were given an army of tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of soldiers. That was the difference between the northern frontier and the other dynasties. That was why Lin Yuan had the confidence to bite the hardest bone. He was confident that in the entire Tianwu world, no dynasty would be able to win against the northern frontier alone. In the camp of the Shuangjin dynasty's remaining troops, Shuangjin Khan sat next to a bonfire, chewing a piece of bacon like he was chewing wax. His face was so gloomy that it looked like it was going to drip water. Be it the northern frontier's Dragon Knights or the Blackwater Army, their combat ability was much stronger than the Shuangjian dynasty's warriors. What was more terrifying was that he could not make an accurate judgment of the northern frontier's army's numbers. No matter which direction the Shuangjian dynasty's army tried to break through, they would run into a large-scale northern frontier's army that would set up checkpoints and encircle them. It seemed like they could not escape from the northern frontier's control, no matter how hard they tried. What was even more terrifying was that the northern frontier's army was not just encircling them one-sidedly. Instead, they were setting up checkpoints and checkpoints from the outside. They were gradually encircling Shuangjin Khan's army's area of activity. Ironically, Shuangjin Khan was very familiar with the northern frontier's army's tactics. Aside from plundering the borders of their neighboring countries every year, the Frost Mirror dynasty's greatest pastimes were two. One was hunting, and the other was playing polo. The so-called hunting was where the Frost Mirror dynasty would first encircle a hunting area and capture all kinds of wild beasts and demonic beasts before placing them in that area for the Frost Mirror dynasty to hunt for fun. These prey could only hide or ambush within the designated area because they had no way of leaving. If they didn't walk into a dead end, they would be killed by the Frost Mirror warriors who were in charge of guarding the area. Shuangjin Khan was a person who liked to enjoy life. He would hold at least 2 hunting events every year. This time, the Northern Frontier's army started their first hunting event on the grassland. They were the prey in the jar. It was humiliating, but there was nothing they could do, not to mention whether they could defeat the Northern Frontier's army or not. They were not even willing to fight them. They were encircling their area of activity step by step. But as long as the Shuangjin dynasty's army did not try to escape, they would not take the initiative to attack them even if they encountered them. It was as if they were waiting for something. More importantly, the revered Shuang Jintian Kagan's control over his army was abnormally weak. His loyal Bloodridge Knights had all perished at the checkpoint, and the rest were small and medium-sized tribes loyal to the imperial family. But this loyalty was clearly limited. To put it bluntly, they were loyal to the heavenly Kagan who could give them a better life, not this stubborn old man who had led the Shuang Jintian warriors into despair. He often saw the Khans of other tribes gathering together and whispering. He also heard that someone wanted to take his head and send it to the northern frontier in exchange for a way out. What was more terrifying was that at first, he could still use Shuangjin Khan's name to command some troops. But as time went by, Shuangjin Khan's name became less and less useful. Not to mention the other tribes. Even some members of the Shuel Yao tribe would stare at him with eyes that made his hair stand on end from time to time. He recognized that gaze. It was the burning desire to survive. He had seen it in the eyes of many people who wailed under the scimitar. These were all hidden dangers that were still brewing, but he was helpless against them. He couldn't think of a way to deal with them unless he could lead the Frost Mirror warriors and find a way to survive. Otherwise, these hidden dangers would erupt sooner or later. When that time came, let alone their heads, even their limbs and organs would be cut into countless pieces and sent to the northern realms to be rewarded for meritorious deeds. Chapter 1133. Why did they have to provoke the northern frontier? He couldn't answer this question. Even thinking about it made him feel like he was suffocating. His favorite son had died at the northern frontier. His undefeated glory had come to an end at the northern frontier. Not to mention, his wealth was like flowing water. These were all important factors that were enough to destroy his rationality and cause him to launch a war against the northern frontier. However, the grassland was an unreasonable place. A place with abundant water and grass today could turn into a swamp tomorrow. Just like the wars of the Xuanjin dynasty, they were never reasonable. If you won, you would have everything you wanted. If you lost, you would have nothing. Now that the war had come to this point, the path in front of him was clear. He either had to find a way to survive as soon as possible, or wait for the Black Jiao at the northern frontier to give the order. Then his warriors would swarm him like rabid dogs and eat him alive. I've taken a look at the encampments of all the tribes, and the situation is not optimistic. Like us, the tribes that went on the expedition, we brought some supplies with us. Before the transport line was cut off, we also saved some supplies. However, those small and medium-sized tribes that followed us and wanted to pick up the leftovers were already running out of supplies in all aspects, especially food. I'm afraid that after a period of time, there will be a tragedy of horses being killed and eaten. A middle-aged man in a white fox fur coat took off the scimitar at his waist and sat across from Frost Mirror Khan with a serious expression. He stared at the bonfire in front of him, lost in thought for a moment. Eating and drinking horse meat and drinking horse blood was acceptable. Even in Lin Yuan's previous life, there were many sieges where people had no choice but to kill all the livestock and drink their blood. Even the war horses and oxen couldn't escape this fate. If that wasn't enough, then they would have to enter an even more tragic phase, which was the so-called eating people or eating people. But why were there so few people who ate horse meat? First of all, no matter the time and place, war horses were a very scarce resource. Just like at the end of the Qin dynasty and the beginning of the Han dynasty, Xiangyu plundered almost 90% of Qin Shi Huang's wealth and only managed to raise 40,000 cavalrymen. At the beginning of the Han dynasty, Liu Bang fought against the Xiongnu and drove them out of the Han dynasty to the grasslands. He was at a disadvantage because he did not have war horses. He was surrounded on Mount White and almost led to the demise of the Han dynasty. A person who could own a war horse couldn't possibly be a common soldier. Ordinary people didn't have access to horsemanship, nor did they know how to raise and train horses. Therefore, if one wanted to become a cavalry in the era of cold weapons, one must first have a good family background. The longer history went, the more this was true. After all, even generals couldn't afford to ride a horse. Some ministers even had to take ox carts to court. How could a common soldier ride a horse? Second of all, a lot of resources were needed to cultivate a cavalry. Even if one cultivated a cavalry at the lowest level, the resources invested would be enough to cultivate 3 to 5 infantrymen. People who had eaten horse meat would have a special smell on them. This smell couldn't be smelled by humans. Just like how dogs wouldn't eat dog bones, people who had eaten horse meat would be repelled by the horse. Without a certain level of physical fitness, horsemanship, and equipment, being repelled by the horse meant that the person was disqualified from being a cavalry. Of course, the Frost Mirror grassland didn't lack war horses. However, people who had eaten horse meat would also be repelled by the horse. In an extremely harsh environment like the grassland, after losing a reliable companion like a horse, it was impossible to survive with only 2 legs. The harsh environment of the grasslands was not only due to sudden changes in the environment, but also a large number of other factors. For example, when it snowed in winter, even cultivators could freeze to death, and some reference points would also be covered up. This was known as the White Disaster. However, when the weather was hot, some grasslands could even be set ablaze. These two situations could be said to be very common. Without experience and amount, once one encountered such a situation, only death would await them. For any Frost Mirror man, eating horse meat and drinking horse blood could solve their immediate problems. However, in reality, it was tantamount to giving up their right to continue living in the grassland. Once the situation worsened, the first thing they would do wouldn't be to kill their own mounts to fill their stomachs. Instead, they would rob the other tribes of their food, or even kill them in exchange for a chance to survive. Frost Mirror Khan gulped down 2 mouthfuls of water and swallowed the bacon in his mouth. He said slowly, "Our situation isn't any better. If we tighten our belts, we can still survive for a while. In about half a month, we will also run out of food. Therefore, not only do we not have the ability to support them, we don't even have the right to pity them." The middle-aged man's lips twitched. He was still staring at the dancing bonfire. He said helplessly, "Then we can only wait for the camp to explode. Humph, they're just a bunch of rats. I can see that they all want to skin me alive. However, if the northern frontier doesn't say anything, they won't dare to touch a single hair of mine. Because they don't know what the northern frontier wants. They don't know if the northern frontier wants to live or die. Therefore, they can only stay in this stalemate." Frost Mirror Khan said disdainfully as he hung his water bag back on his waist. The middle-aged man shook his head. He said bitterly, "That's true. However, the problem is that without food, hunger will drive those people crazy. When they attack our camp, I'm afraid some people will be more than happy to do so. They will even fan the flames." "How dare they?" Frost Mirror Khan couldn't help but raise his voice. He said coldly, "No matter how poor I am still the heavenly Khan of the Frost Mirror Grassland. That Black Jiao doesn't have the guts to break the balance between the 7 dynasties. Yes, it definitely doesn't. It's just an animal. What does it know? At most, it wants to teach us a lesson." The middle-aged man shrugged and didn't comment on Frost Mirror Khan's hysterical self-comforting words. Did the northern frontier really not dare to break the balance between the 7 dynasties? If that was the case, then why did he arrange all this? Or would the Black Jiao allow the Shuangjian dynasty to continue existing after eating up the main force of the Frost Mirror Grassland? Wait, Frost Mirror Khan lowered his voice again. He said in a low voice, "Third brother already knew that something was wrong with the northern frontier. It's my fault. I didn't trust him and even killed his messenger. However, he must know about our predicament. Let's wait. Maybe his reinforcements are already on the way. Am I right? That must be it. I am the Honorable Frost Mirror Khan. I will not die in a place like this." Chapter 1134. "You don't know your son very well," the middle-aged man wanted to reply. However, he knew that Frost Mirror Khan was on the verge of breaking down. Once he knew how bad the situation was, not only would he not be able to wake the Heavenly Khan up, but he would also break down completely and lose his last bit of value. Yes, his last bit of value. Every man for himself, and the devil takes the hindmost. The middle-aged man didn't want to die, and he didn't want to die because of someone else's foolishness. That was why he pretended to be a loyal bodyguard. However, once the situation changed, he would be the one to take Mirfrost's head. However, this conversation made the middle-aged man think of another hair-raising possibility. The cunning third prince would most likely go to the northern frontier. However, it was hard to say whether he would come to save them or not. Meanwhile, in the mansion of the king of the northern frontier, a guard in a Kirin uniform bowed to Lin Yuan, Li Xian, and Li Zhong. Then he said in a deep voice, a group of cavalrymen suddenly appeared outside the city. They are from the Shuangjian dynasty. They said that they must meet the king of the northern frontier because it concerns the diplomatic relations between the two countries. I have received confirmation that the leader of this group of cavalrymen is the third prince of the Shuangjian dynasty. Crack! Li Zhong crushed a pair of iron balls in his hand. Li Xian reached out his hand and touched his chin, looking pensive. On the contrary, Lin Yuan's eyes were calm, as if he was not surprised by the appearance of this scene. Li Zhong sprinkled the iron powder in his hand and said with a gloomy face, well done. The third prince is indeed a cunning fox. He knew that we wanted to kill him, so he asked Dariachi to pretend to be him and appear near the Wei River. He lured away Zhang Xiuzhu and the other MI7 members who had a blood feud with the Frost Mirror Barbarian. After that, he snuck into the northern frontier. Now that the time is right, he jumped out of his own accord. Really? Yes. Really? Ah. The last 5 words were squeezed out through gritted teeth, one at a time, with pauses between his teeth. From this, it could be seen that Li Zhong was extremely angry at the third prince's actions. Previously, he had been in charge of all the dispatching in the northern frontier, especially after Lin Yuan had sent the army into the Hengduan Mountains. He had set up such a murderous plot against the third prince. In the end, not only had he been fainted, he had also been slapped in the face. Strange. Li Xian narrowed his eyes slightly and said, although the brocade guard can't completely infiltrate the Frost Mirror grassland, it's not like they don't know anything about what's happening there. I'm certain that Dariachi, who's playing the role of the third prince, has always been under our surveillance. So, where did the third prince hide? How did he communicate with Dariachi? How did he know that we've already forced the Frost Mirror Dynasty's army into a dead end? Li Xian's point of view was very interesting. At this time, it was tantamount to admitting that the brocade guard was not capable enough. But from another perspective, it could be understood that Li Xian felt that the brocade guard who had infiltrated the Frost Mirror grassland had sent back false information. Now, there might be a mole in the northern frontier. At the very least, it was the frontline personnel who had failed in their duties and had to be dealt with severely. Just thinking about it for a while, Li Zhong seemed to smell a strong smell of blood. It should be known that although the brocade guard was under Li Xian, it was not Li Xian who had the final say. Not to mention that there were die-hard loyalists of Luo Su. There was no suitable reason to get rid of them. Moreover, the brocade guard was too close to the top officials of the northern frontier, especially Yu Dingxian. Now, he had joined forces with Zhang Xiuzhu to form the MI7, but there were still members of Yu Dingxian's faction in the brocade guard. Li Xian was looking for an excuse to kill. Glancing at Li Xian's indifferent eyes, the brocade guard who reported the news suddenly trembled. He said in a low voice, "Commander, we really don't know what happened to the third prince." It was like he suddenly appeared at the northern frontier. Our brothers almost plowed the area and found nothing unusual. This, humph. Li Xian snorted and his eyes turned cold. He said, "Is this the final explanation you're going to give me? Then, why did the third prince of the Xuanjin dynasty come in when the two countries were at war? And why did a piece of trash like you come to report the news when the third prince was about to arrive at Shunning City? All the outposts and strongholds set up along the way were all destroyed? No one could report the news? You also said that you only knew the news when the third prince appeared outside Shunning City. You didn't even know how he came here?" The brocade guard who reported the news was silent for a moment. Then he said with an embarrassed expression, "Yes, he came with the wind. I heard that it was not that no one found him on the way, but that all the people who found him were all inexplicably sick. They were in a coma for a few days before waking up. That's why no information was sent back." Bullsh asterisk T, you think? Li Xian's expression changed, and he suddenly wanted to curse. Are you telling me a ghost story? Even in ghost stories, people would fall sick after seeing a ghost. The embroidered uniform guard took 2 steps back after being scolded by Li Xian. Then he said timidly, "It's true. I heard that this is the work of an almighty person. Moreover, that almighty person said that if he is willing, a plague will break out in the northern region. At that time, it won't be as simple as being in a coma for 3 days. Therefore, when I came to deliver the message, I specifically mentioned this matter. He also said that if the Dragon King isn't willing to meet them, they can leave immediately. Everyone can fight it out. Also, that almighty person said that he is called Yu Jiang. Yu Jiang. Lin Yuan's eyes suddenly widened. After the war between the dragon race and the phoenix race in Kirin, the dragon race retreated to the Four Seas and became the overlords. This saying had been widely spread, but in fact, the overlords of the Four Seas were not the dragon race of the Four Seas. In other words, it was not only the dragon race of the Four Seas. The emperor gave birth to Yu Jiang. He was conferred the title of God of the Eastern Sea and ruled the Eastern Sea. And Yu Jiang? He was born in Yujiang and was conferred the title of the god of the North Sea. He wasn't the kind of god on the investiture of the gods who could be ordered around. Instead, he was conferred by the human king and was a legitimate overlord who ruled over a region. His strength wasn't inferior to the dragon race in the Four Seas. Yujiang? He was conferred the title of the god of the East Sea by the Yellow Emperor Xinyuan. Yujiang was even more powerful. He didn't rely on his father to make a living. He was Zhuanqu's minister. It could be said that the Yellow Emperor conferred the East Sea to Yujiang. The Mystic Emperor conferred the North Sea to Yujiang. There didn't seem to be a big difference, but don't forget that Zhuanqu was the descendant of the Yellow Emperor when he was on the throne. At that time, Yinglong had already assisted the Yellow Emperor to unify the world and completed the plan of the Fushan Talisman. The strength of the dragon race that became the totem wasn't something the Yellow Emperor could compare with. Chapter 1135. In the majority of legends, Zhuanqu was not like the Yellow Emperor, who repeatedly jumped between the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. He was one of the 5 emperors, and he was also the ancestor of humanity. He was also the celestial emperor who controlled the North Sea. From this, it could be seen that Zhuanqu's ability and trust was not something the other almighty experts of that era could compare to. What was even more terrifying was that Yu Jiang did not only have the title of Sea God of the North Sea, he also had the title of Wind God, Plague God. Once Yu Jiang was angered, he would raise a huge gale. Not only would it spread plagues, but it would also injure people just by being blown by the wind. Although he had some understanding of Yu Jiang, Lin Yuan's focus was not on how powerful Yu Jiang was. What he was thinking about was what kind of sin the Yellow Emperor had committed. His daughter had become Drought God. His grandson had become Plague God. Yu Jiang, of course, this was just a joke. This also showed how powerful the Yellow Emperor's bloodline was. Any random person would be able to shake the entire Yin Huang continent with a stomp of their feet. However, Yu Jiang's appearance at this time had indeed exceeded Lin Yuan's expectations. Did the people who escaped from the great desolate world know the secret of the heaven martial world? This matter was still a question. However, what was certain was that the heaven martial world was about to be restored. Those people who originally stood aloof from worldly affairs and had few desires were now impatiently jumping out. Their goal was none other than to leave behind their legacy. They did not ask for any illusory advancement, but at least they wanted to ensure that in the new era, they would not fall behind because of mediocrity. They really did not come with good intentions. Lin Yuan did have respect for human kings like the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, but he was a pragmatic person after all. He would not directly raise the white flag and share his interests with the other party just because he had respect for the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. If he was like this to the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, then what about an existence like Yu Jiang? Lin Yuan was even prepared to deal with existences like the 6 saints of heaven and Hongjun. How could he miss out on Yu Jiang? Lord Dragon King, you know this? Yu Jiang? Li Zhong was keenly aware of the change in Lin Yuan and asked in a deep voice. Lin Yuan nodded slightly and said indifferently, I've heard of this name, but I've never seen him before. In a sense, he and I can be considered to be from the same hometown. This guy has some tricks up his sleeve. You guys stay here. I'll go meet him. Hearing this, Li Zhong and Li Exan cupped their hands together and said, May the Dragon King win. Although he didn't know the origin of Yu Jiang, Lin Yuan's performance in the Tianwu world showed that the world behind him was extremely terrifying. It was because of this background that Lin Yuan disdained the cultivators of the Tianwu world. After all, the Tianwu world was just a speck of dust that could be destroyed with a wave of his hand. Even the sky demon created by the Nether River Patriarch could make the native cultivators of the Tianwu world helpless. Since this Yu Jiang came from the Dragon King's world, and was even evaluated by the Dragon King as having some tricks up his sleeve. That meant that this Yujiang was not an existence that they could provoke at their level. Then they should just stay here obediently. Going out to cause trouble for the Dragon King in the name of helping him was the path to death. Everyone knew that their Dragon King did not have the heart of a saint. Even if he did, it was because he pitted those ordinary people who lived at the bottom and did not have any talent for cultivation. That was why he promoted all kinds of policies to benefit the people and reduce taxes in all aspects. But to the cultivators, the Dragon King's attitude was only one. Innocent people should be killed. If anyone violated the Dragon King's taboo, then sorry. No matter how strong your background was, if he said he would kill you, then he would kill you. At the same time, Lin Yuan turned into a black light and arrived outside Shunning City in an instant. What he saw was a monster. The face of a human, the body of a bird, a pair of wings on its back, 2 green feathers hanging from its ears, and 2 green snakes under its feet. This image was very much in line with the image of Yujiang. After all, in the Warring States period, there was the existence of the Yujiang seal, which clearly showed the true image of Yujiang. Later on, with the development of culture, some turtle characteristics were slowly added to Yujiang's body, forcibly turning Yujiang into a Xianming that was a combination of a turtle and a snake. You are the Black Jiao? Yujiang glanced at Lin Yuan condescendingly and asked with a somewhat disdainful tone. To Yujiang, Lin Yuan was indeed not worth paying attention to. In terms of strength, Lin Yuan of the Desolate Demon Realm could not be ranked among the experts that Yujiang had seen. This was because, according to seniority, Yujiang was an existence of the same level as Zhenwu Great Emperor. They were both capable subordinates of Zhuanxiu. It was just that compared to Zhenwu Great Emperor, who succeeded Zhuanxiu as the North Sky Emperor, Yujiang's reputation was not prominent. However, assisting Zhuanxiu, Yujiang had seen countless experts and experienced countless challenges. He was an existence that had seen the world. Even if Lin Yuan had an extremely dazzling battle record, it was still difficult for him to enter his eyes. More importantly, Yujiang was originally the god of the North Sea. He was in charge of both the god of wind and the god of plagues. It could be said that Yujiang was an overlord in the North Sea. However, not to mention the various races in the North Sea, just the North Sea dragon race alone had competed with Yujiang for the right to be the overlord of the North Sea more than once. Therefore, Yujiang had an extremely bad first impression of Lin Yuan's dragon bloodline. Moreover, Lin Yuan was not a pure-blooded dragon. He could only be considered a relatively pure-blooded flood dragon. He might be amazing in the Tianwu world, but in the untainted world, his bloodline could be found everywhere. Any random demon beast would be more terrifying than Lin Yuan in terms of bloodline. When all these conditions were put together, Yujiang indeed had no need to be polite to Lin Yuan. In other words, he did not want to be polite. He had not come out of seclusion to the northern frontier to make friends. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and ignored Yujiang. Instead, his gaze fell on the third prince. Since you dare to appear in front of me at this time, that means you're certain that I won't kill you? Of course, since I'm willing to see you today, I know what you want. I can give it to you, but you have to show your sincerity, right? Facing Lin Yuan's question, the third prince only pondered for a moment before smiling. Lord Dragon King is a straightforward person. Then I'll also get straight to the point. I do indeed want the rights to rule the Shuangjian dynasty and the Frost Mirror Plains, but in truth, I have no idea what I can exchange with the Dragon King. So, I'll have to trouble the Dragon King to state your conditions. If they're acceptable, I will accept them all. Chapter 1136. The third prince's mind worked very quickly. At this juncture, the Shuangjian dynasty could not send out another army that could fight. Even if they did, they could not organize a counterattack against the northern frontier. Instead, they had to be wary of the monster tide that could come out of the Hengduan Mountains at any time. The people who fled to the Witheredwood dynasty had also brought a lot of losses to the Witheredwood dynasty. Once they regrouped, they would probably launch a counterattack against the Shuangjian dynasty. If you hit them first, there was no reason for them not to retaliate, right? Moreover, there was already a feud between the two sides. Even if they did not provoke the Witheredwood dynasty, the Witheredwood dynasty would not let go of the chance to beat them while they were down. Any outstanding strategist and politician knew that war was always a closed loop. A balance had to be reached in order to be in an invincible position. If there was a particularly outstanding segment, then it was possible to have the last laugh. This time, the Shuangjian dynasty's war against the northern frontier was definitely an accident. From a strategic point of view, the northern frontier had formulated a series of plans to counter the Shuangjian dynasty and implemented them. At the beginning, almost no one on the Shuangjian dynasty's side reacted. By the time he reacted and gave a warning, the arrow was already knocked on the bow and had to be released. If it had been the Heaven Khan who knew himself better and was decisive in killing, perhaps he would have gritted his teeth and forcefully stopped the march. However, it was clear that his father was not that kind of person. This Heaven Khan had dominated the grasslands for most of his life. Even in his old age, he still stubbornly believed that he was a famous general who had dominated the world. Moreover, at the juncture of his abdication, he still tried to give it his all so that he could pass on his power with full glory. However, it was clear that this war not only did not give him any glory, but the prestige he had built in his early years was also destroyed. It could be said that he could not protect his integrity in his later years. From the moment the Shuangjian dynasty's army had been badly battered under the Great Wall of the northern frontier, the loser of this game had already appeared. Whether it was strategy or tactics, his father had been played in the palm of the northern frontier. Now, they were already at the northern frontier. If he hoped that the Shuangjian dynasty would be destroyed, the Shuangjian dynasty would be destroyed directly. The cruel reality was right in front of his eyes, and the third prince had no choice but to take one last gamble. The reason why he came here today was because he had deduced countless times in his mind. In the end, he was certain that once the Black Jiao broke the current situation of the seven empires in the Sky Martial Continent, countless ambitious people would spring up like bamboo shoots after the rain. At that time, unless there was an extremely powerful force interfering, the seven empires and even the forces on the continent like the Hungduan Mountain Range and the Southern Wasteland Demon Range would probably start to crazily kill and compete. In the end, it would only end when there was only one winner left. However, the winner would definitely not be the northern frontier. This was because the northern region was the one who had instigated this chaotic era. Moreover, they possessed strength that no other dynasty could compare to. If they were to sit back and watch the northern region develop, no one would have the confidence to say that they could defeat the northern region when the chaotic era arrived. Therefore, before the chaotic era, every dynasty would definitely join forces to attack the northern region first. Only after they had killed the Black WYRM would they begin to fight for the world. This was the third prince's only bargaining chip. He was betting that the Black Jiao would not insist on destroying the Shuangjian dynasty when the northern frontier was obviously not a match for the other empires. As long as he could survive, there would still be a chance, even if he had to bow down to him. Lin Yuan's eyes were slightly playful. He said, "You're really smart. I heard that before your father sent out his troops, you had already seen through my scheme against the entire Shuangjian dynasty. You even sent someone to warn your father. Unfortunately, your father ignored it." At this point, he paused, and his eyes became more and more playful. He said, "In these 3 months, you've made some small calculations to test the northern region's attitude towards you. You've also truly guessed what I want to do. So, after countless calculations, you've determined that the northern region is still unable to contend against the combined forces of the 5 empires. So you want to take a gamble, right?" "Yes." The third prince took 2 deep breaths and replied with a smile. The feeling of being seen through was actually not a good feeling, especially under Lin Yuan's gaze. He felt that even now, he had no secrets to speak of. Even the playful look on Lin Yuan's face was because Lin Yuan had seen through his thoughts. It was like a cat that had eaten its fill and was teasing a frightened mouse. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and tilted his head. He said, "Then here comes a question. Why you want to take a gamble? How do you know that we don't want to take a gamble?" Hearing this, the third prince's eyes began to widen. A hint of fear appeared in his eyes. Obviously, after being reminded by the word gamble, he had already guessed the Northern Frontier's real plan. That was why Lin Yuan said, "You are really smart." But unfortunately, most of the time, smart people were not necessarily the winners. Just like in the late Qin and early Han dynasties, Zhang Liang, who was known as the strategist saint, wanted to revive Korea. However, he was schemed against by Liu Bang again and again. In the end, his dream of reviving the country was completely shattered. Even Han Wangcheng, who was his assistant, was killed by Xiang Yu. He did not dare to take the 20,000 fiefs promised by Liu Bang. He used cultivation as an excuse to live in seclusion and never appeared in the world again. If one wanted to be the winner, it was not enough to be smart. The third prince's mouth twitched slightly. He cupped his hands at Lin Yuan and said, "The Dragon King also said that this is a gamble. Today, my gamble is nothing more than trying my best to save the Xuanjian dynasty, which is already on the verge of collapse. But the Dragon King's gamble is the biggest mistake in the world. How does the Dragon King know that if you attack the Deadwood dynasty, the other dynasties will definitely sit on the sidelines and watch the tigers fight instead of joining forces with the Deadwood dynasty to attack the northern frontier? If the Dragon King wins this gamble, he will only get the Frost Mirror grassland, which is of little value. He will also have to invest a lot of manpower and resources to fight with the Deadwood dynasty. Even if he wins against the Deadwood dynasty, it will create a situation where both sides will not care about each other. But if he loses, the good situation will be destroyed, and the entire northern frontier will be shattered under the war. I believe that this is not the situation that the Dragon King wants to see. Take advantage of the situation and govern by doing nothing." Lin Yuan opened his big mouth and smiled, and immediately spat out 8 words seriously. The third prince was slightly stunned. His eyes narrowed to the size of needles. He could understand the meaning of Lin Yuan's words. Or rather, it was because he could understand the meaning of this sentence that he became more and more afraid. Not to mention in the Tianwu world where strength was everything, even in his previous world where there were countless schemes and strategies, it was something that many people would never be able to understand in their entire lives. From a certain point of view, these 8 words could be called the core of the Emperor's mind tricks. Chapter 1137. Lin Yuan informed the third prince of his next plan in just 8 words. Simply put, the northern frontier's strategy was to first put themselves in a difficult situation. When the time came, the main forces of the northern frontier would enter an anxious tug-of-war with the main forces of the Kumu Empire. It would be impossible to determine the winner in a short period of time. The other empires might not necessarily watch from the sidelines, but they definitely wouldn't be as anxious to deal with the northern frontier as before. This was especially so for the Xinjiang Empire, which had always been weak. After losing their absolute geographical advantage, they probably wouldn't have the guts to fall out with the northern frontier. The Chuyan Empire, which was a little closer, was even more so. Lin Yuan had previously overturned the entire imperial court, causing the Chuyan Empire to almost fall into chaos similar to the Xinwu dynasty. Every city was controlled by different aristocratic families and sects, and the imperial court's influence was almost at its weakest. However, the Chuyan Empire couldn't allocate that many administrative personnel to take over the government affairs in a short period of time. They could only let things slide and barely maintain the imperial city's operations. In addition, the Southern Wilderness Demon Range's betrayal had destroyed the Chuyan Empire's military might and snatched away a large amount of their territory. The Chuyan Empire's tiger soldiers had also been wiped out in the Hengduan Mountains and the Southern Wilderness Demon Range's betrayal. It would take a lot of time to train them again. It could be said that misfortune never came alone. It was already good enough that the Chuyan Empire could send its decree out of the imperial city. Not to mention falling out with the northern frontier, the young emperor, who had just ascended the throne, was probably still thinking about how to ease the relationship with the northern frontier. It wasn't that the Chuyan Empire and the Xinjiang Empire would ignore the situation and watch the northern frontier continue to grow if things really got that bad. However, when the northern frontier fell into trouble, they would most likely prioritize dealing with their own internal troubles instead of provoking the northern frontier. Among the 5 empires, the Withered Tree Empire was entangled with the northern frontier. The Xinjiang Empire and the Yun Nation Empire remained silent. The remaining 2 empires couldn't meddle in other people's affairs. Instead, they took advantage of the chaos to ruthlessly kill the aristocratic families and sects within their borders. Firstly, it was to increase the imperial court's control over the territories under their rule. Secondly, it was to get rid of a group of ambitious people who were preparing to fight for power in advance and expand their national treasury. This was the terrifying influence of governing by doing nothing. Although all the empires would view the northern frontier as an enemy, they would not look for trouble when the northern frontier was in trouble. Unless the northern frontier was as unstoppable as before, eliminating the Xuanjian dynasty and Deadwood dynasty in one fell swoop. Only then would they unite out of fear. As for the influence of taking advantage of the situation, although it had not exploded yet, as long as one was not blind or mentally challenged, they would quickly realize that the situation where the 7 empires ruled the Tianwu continent would no longer exist. At that time, the aristocratic families and sects would probably rise up in revolt. Regardless of whether it was in terms of scale or ambition, it was not something that the Xinwu dynasty could compare to in the turmoil after it was paralyzed. Why did the aristocratic families and sects of the Xinwu dynasty rebel? It was nothing more than to show off their muscles and wait for the Xinwu dynasty to resolve their problems. Then, they could wait for the right price and further increase their status and power. This was the tacit rule of the game. For countless years, the aristocratic families and sects had played this game. They simply did not seriously rebel. Thus, they were ruthlessly bitten off by the well-prepared northern frontier. However, with the start of the chaotic era, the situation of the 7 empires was broken. In other words, if the final victor appeared among the powers that participated in the struggle for supremacy, it would not be the ruler of one of the 7 empires, but the supreme existence of the entire Tianwu continent. If it could stabilize its imperial power, it would not be much inferior to the guardian of the heavenly gate thousands of years later. Think about it, because the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce controlled the business lifeline of the Tianwu continent. It had actually transformed from a newly established Chamber of Commerce into one of the few large chambers of commerce in the Tianwu continent in less than 3 years. If it was not for the fact that in order to join the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, they would have to give up all their land and slaves and become a legal aristocratic family under the Northern Frontier Law. Otherwise, the aristocratic families of the 7 empires might have already sharpened their heads to join the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. This kind of temptation was not something that anyone could resist. Under the situation where the Northern Frontier became the public enemy, many people had already subconsciously excluded the Northern Frontier. Some people had even started to daydream about the supreme existence of the Northern Frontier. Lost. These 2 words echoed in the third prince's mind. There were some things that one would not know how terrifying they were until they faced them. When the Black Jiao returned to the Northern Frontier, he had already made a series of strategic arrangements. What was even more terrifying was that after giving up on a path that was obviously stable and powerful, he quickly came up with a plan that seemed to be extremely dangerous. Not to mention that the Northern Frontier would not be able to take down the Withered Tree Empire in a short period of time. Even if the Northern Frontier could take down the Withered Tree Empire, they would not be able to take care of both sides due to the vast grasslands in between. Even he, who knew about the Northern Frontier's plan and was part of it, felt a chill run down his spine. This was because even he did not expect that once the Northern Frontier was entangled with the Withered Tree Empire, their originally incomparably powerful overall strength would at best be split into 2. In other words, the Northern Frontier would once again fall to the average level, or even slightly below the average level. Even the Azure River Empire would not have to worry about the Northern Frontier attacking the Azure River Empire at this time. He had come to the Northern Frontier to take a gamble. But he did not expect that the Northern Frontier was also taking a huge gamble. The game between the 2 sides had not even officially started, and he had already suffered a crushing defeat. He could not even find a way to turn the situation around. In other words, from the moment the Shuangjin dynasty sent out their troops, the destruction of the grasslands was already destined. Now, it was just a matter of when the northern frontier wanted to finish the job. Otherwise, with the troops led by his father, if they had the ability to fight their way out of the encirclement, they would not have been trapped for 3 months. The current situation could only mean one thing. The northern frontier wanted them to continue living. The northern frontier, or in other words, the Black Jiao, was waiting for something. Seeing the third prince's defeated expression, Lin Yuan did not pursue the victory. He said indifferently, "So, what do you want to exchange with me?" In this situation where the Shuangjin dynasty has suffered a crushing defeat and the situation of the Tianwu continent is bound to change, you want to persuade me to withdraw the order to exterminate the Shuangjin dynasty? A fierce look flashed in the third prince's eyes. He was a quick-witted person. After thinking through Lin Yuan's strategy, he quickly realized that the Shuangjin dynasty could not be saved. But in this shocking gamble, there was a chance that belonged to him. It depended on whether he could make up his mind to fight for this chance. Chapter 1138. Seeing the third prince's hesitant look, Lin Yuan did not see any disappointment in his eyes, as if everything was within his expectations. Thus, he turned around and looked at Yu Jiang. He was silent for a moment before he said, "As for why you came to the northern region to look for me, I'm also aware of it. I only have one response to this. Even if you're dreaming, you should have a sense of propriety." Yu Jiang narrowed his eyes slightly. Although he did not speak, the green snake hanging by his ear was constantly twisting and baring its teeth at Lin Yuan, as if it was ready to bite Lin Yuan at any time and pour deadly venom into Lin Yuan's body. Yu Jiang and Lin Yuan looked at each other for a moment. Suddenly, his face changed and he shouted, "Qi!" As his voice fell, layers of shadows appeared behind him. The shadows of flowers, birds, fish, insects, mountains, and rivers appeared like a mirage, instantly covering the original appearance of this world. 24 heavens. TSK. I was wondering why Yu Jiang did not go with Hamba, but went with Hong Yuan. It turned out that he had already betrayed the human race and cultivated the Western method. Shanqing Tianzuan, who was secretly watching the battle, could not help but sneer when he saw Yu Jiang make a move. At the same time, his body emitted endless killing intent. During the investiture of the gods, the cause was that the human king, Dexant, did not respect the mandate of heaven and tried to claim the title of human king and establish the human Tao. This forced Hongjun to be furious and set off the cultivation tribulation. He sent Zhang Zia, a disciple of the Jie order, down the mountain with the investiture of the gods and dragged Dexant, who had not yet matured, into the cultivation tribulation. If it was delayed for a while, once the human Tao was established, the 3 sovereigns who were sealed in the fire cloud cave would definitely abolish their position as heavenly sage and lead the human Tao sage. In that cultivation tribulation, although there was an element of acting, who had seen acting that caused one to lose one's fortune? Tongtian sect leader was the most straightforward one among the 6 saints. Although he was not from the human tribe, nor was he the sect leader of the Ren sect like the Grand Elder, he still led his disciples to leave the Aquamarine Palace out of malice toward Hongjun. He agreed to Shen Gongbao's request and led his sect into the calamity. Tongtian did not have a good impression of the human race. However, since the human race had rebelled against Hongjun, they were his comrades. The 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors of the human race, and the Empress Pingxin of the Netherworld were all good friends of Tongtian. Tongtian had heard of Yu Jiang's name before. After all, he was the grandson of the Yellow Emperor and the right-hand man of the human king Zhuanxiu. He was also one of the comrades-in-arms who fought against Hongjun. Therefore, he was not willing to intervene in the battle between Lin Yuan and Yu Jiang. But now, Yu Jiang had summoned the shadows of the 24 heavens. It immediately reminded him of the shameless Western duo in the investiture of the gods. Shanqing Tianzuan rolled up his sleeves. His gaze was gloomy and cold. The 4 flying swords revolved around him as he stared coldly at Yu Jiang. He planned to give him a ruthless blow when he was caught off guard. Motherf ****, Lin Yuan's expression changed. He did not have time to think. He opened his mouth and spat out a green light. It was the willow branch bestowed by the old ancestor Yang Mei. He was not worried that he was not Yu Jiang's opponent. He had no idea whether Yu Jiang cultivated the righteous path of the human world or the Western Buddhism. However, before the battle, Yu Jiang could ignore it. But as the god of the northern frontier, he had to consider the people of the northern frontier under his rule. Behind him was the capital of the northern frontier, Shunning City. He would definitely not be able to withstand the power of the 24 heavens. However, if he dodged, Shunning City would suffer a calamity. The willow branch shot out like a celestial sword and slammed into the 24 heavens, shattering them into pieces. Although Yu Jiang cultivated the Western Dharma, in the end, this was the Tianwu world. He could not display his original strength. Even the 24 heavens that he summoned had long been incorporated into the chaotic world by the Western sect. He had only summoned an afterimage. It was indeed a supreme power. However, compared to the willow branch that was cut off by the old ancestor Yang Mei's main body, it was still more than one level inferior. Yu Jiang's attack did not succeed. A look of surprise appeared on his face. However, he was after all a mighty person who had been in battle for a long time. He did not react. He casually pushed, and the remaining power of the 24 heavens phantoms once again smashed towards Lin Yuan. He did not believe that although Lin Yuan had a supreme treasure on him, he could still activate it without limit. Boom! A loud sound spread. The broken 24 heavens phantoms smashed down. Although Lin Yuan did not have time to call back the willow branch, he summoned his limitless demon domain. The two world phantoms collided for a moment and dissipated. Lin Yuan's face was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. Previously, he summoned the limitless demon domain to subdue Mosquito Dauren. In the end, his cultivation was ruined by Mosquito Dauren's recitation of Tao Te Ching. In these 3 months, he had just reformed the limitless demon domain. He did not expect that after being touched by Yu Jiang, the fragile limitless demon domain would collapse again. If it was not for the two world phantoms clashing, the aftershock of this collision would have swept across tens of thousands of miles. Rain come after Lin Yuan died in anger. In an instant, the sky changed color. Dark clouds condensed out of thin air. It was as if the heavenly river had been overturned. Shanqing Tianzuan, who was about to make a move, slightly bowed. He pondered for a moment and waved his hand. The 4 flying swords hid in his sleeves. He calmly stared at the area where Lin Yuan and Yu Jiang were fighting. He knew that this brat was not honest. Last time when he dealt with Mosquito Dauren, he did not use his full strength at all. Although both sides were comrades in arms against Hongjun, there was no fairy tale in the adult world. There was only talk of benefits. The secret of the Tianwu world's nurturing was very likely to be a supreme treasure. Although all things in the world reinforced and restrained each other, it did not make sense that another world that was not related to the Great Desolate Age would specially nurture a supreme treasure that could kill Hongjun. Therefore, this supreme treasure was most likely in existence, more terrifying than the Pangu banner or the demon refining gourd. It was terrifying to the extent that it could kill an almighty at Hongjuan's level. No matter who this supreme treasure landed in, it would be a huge threat. Of course, other than himself. Therefore, Lin Yuan, Shanqing Tianzuan, Taoist Red Cloud, and even those hidden almighties, none of them wanted to give in. To reveal one's trump card in front of a competitor, if that was not a fool, what was? Even for Shanqing Tianzuan, the reason why he concealed the identity of Mosquito Dauren was because he wanted to borrow Mosquito Dauren's hands to test how capable the Black Jiao was and whether he was qualified to compete with him and Red Cloud for that supreme treasure. He did not expect that this brat actually dared to conceal his identity when facing an existence at the level of Mosquito Dauren. Under the pouring rain, ordinary people could not even open their eyes. However, Lin Yuan's blue and white eyes were filled with endless killing intent. But Yu Jiang gave a cold laugh and said mockingly, "I've seen many of the dragon race's tricks of moving clouds and summoning rain. It's just a bluff. Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Lin Yuan did not continue the conversation. His face was cold, and there was a rumbling sound of thunder behind him. Chapter 1139. The blue thunder and lightning roared and wrapped around Lin Yuan's body like a layer of armor. He was like an unruly demon king who was roaring with his head raised, disrespecting the heavens and disrespecting the earth. Suddenly, an aura of supremacy in the four seas and the universe exploded. Although Yu Jiang said that he wasn't afraid, he still clasped his hands together under the roar of thunder. His body expanded, revealing his golden body with golden Buddhist light circulating around him. You think you're qualified to shout at this king? Lin Yuan was high up in the sky, hiding his body in a thundercloud, but his voice became louder and louder. At this moment, the entire northern region, whether mortals or cultivators, could not help but look at the thundercloud above Shunning City, especially some young cultivators, who could not help showing a yearning look in their eyes. A real man standing in the world should be like this. The Black Jiao of the northern frontier had never lost a battle since he left the Hengduan Mountains. Even though the Black Jiao rarely fought now, his deeds of killing 2 demon kings were still vivid in their minds. Even the self-proclaimed ruler of the Tianwu world, the protector of the Tianwu world, couldn't help showing a difficult expression when faced with some matters involving the northern frontier. He didn't want to easily provoke the Black Jiao. Although Yu Zhang's expression didn't change, and even under the cover of the Buddhist light, he could vaguely see mercy. However, seeing that Lin Yuan wasn't afraid at all and was determined to fight to the death, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. This time, he came to the northern frontier with the intention of befriending Lin Yuan and leaving behind a portion of the faith. After accumulating a certain amount of faith, he might not be able to advance further, but at least in the future, he would be able to guarantee that he would be in the first or second echelon. At that time, whether he fought with others to become the ruler of the world or became a subordinate in name, he could do whatever he wanted. But after all, he was the god of the North Sea. In the untainted world, although he assisted Zhuanshu, he was absolutely a supreme existence in his own territory. And in the North Sea, the only ones qualified to compete with him for hegemony were the North Sea dragon race. If the unhappiness between his father and the dragon race of the East Sea was taken into account, it wouldn't be a problem to say that the two sides were mortal enemies. So when he saw Lin Yuan, he couldn't help but feel a touch of hostility. When he recovered, he was already fighting with Lin Yuan. Originally, it was not a big deal. After all, Lin Yuan was just a flood dragon in his eyes. According to the strength division of the untainted world, the flood dragon may be regarded as a great demon in the mortal world, but it was not very powerful. Some successful practitioners could subdue the flood dragon. For other species in the untainted land, the flood dragon was even a bloody meal. Even the dragon tribe itself was not very willing to accept the flood dragon. After all, although the flood dragon had the word dragon in its name, it was very different from the real dragon. It was only a little stronger than monsters such as the alligator. But now, it seemed that the Black Jiao of the northern frontier was not so easy to deal with, especially the ball of green light that broke his 24 celestial phantoms. He was still unable to recognize what it was, but based on that instant of collision, he was able to determine that it was definitely an item at the level of a natural spirit treasure. This Black Jiao was unknown in the untainted world, but it had a strong fighting strength that didn't match that of a flood dragon. In addition, it had a supreme treasure in its hand. Anyone could see that this Black Jiao's background was not simple. Black Jiao! Yu Jiang took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed his rage and surprise. He said in a low voice, "Although this god doesn't know which era you came from, you should know this god's identity, right? Moreover, with your eyes, can't you see which sect I'm practicing? You should be grateful that I'm discussing with you properly. How dare you try to disobey me? You deserve to die." Hearing this, Shanqing's celestial lord, who was watching the battle, curled his lips and his face was full of disdain. Shaking people and showing off their backgrounds were already the traditional skills of the Western sect. If one were to trace back, they would have already started doing such things before the Western sect's second Shur became a saint. If one were to carefully think about it, These two people would not do anything related to people at all. In the beginning, there was no place for the Western sex Urshi among the 6 heavenly sages. In the end, these two people took advantage of Hong Yun, who had to maintain the image of a nice guy, and cheated Hong Yun of his Hong Meng immortal vapor. After taking away one place to become a sage, they felt that it was not enough, so they turned around and went to find the demon master Kuanping. When facing Hong Yun, they had to pretend that Hong Yun was the disciple of Hong Jun. But when facing the demon master, Kuanping, who was the descendant of the primordial phoenix, they were shameless. They joined forces to attack him and took away his Hong Meng immortal vapor. The most amazing thing was that these two people left Kuanping alive and didn't kill him directly, which brought a fatal disaster to Hong Yun. After doing these things and obtaining the Hong Meng immortal vapor, could one become a sage? That was obviously not enough, because if one wanted to become a sage, one had to have enough strength or use the power of merit to make up for it. Even the great merit of the 3 sovereigns only took away one heavenly path sage's position. From this, one could see how much power of merit was needed when one's strength was not enough. What the Western sex Urshi did next was amazing. The two of them slapped their foreheads and made 48 great wishes. They established the Western sect and attracted a huge amount of power of merit to help them become sages. It sounded normal, right? But in reality, the Western sex Urshi didn't do those 48 great wishes at all, or rather, they just did it on the surface. As for the outcome, one would know by looking at what the Western sect did. The so-called sages were not tainted by karma. It didn't mean that after becoming a sage, they would be free from karma. But for sages, they had supreme mana and endless lifespan. No matter what kind of karma they were tainted with, they only needed to do it slowly and pay it back slowly. What would happen if they didn't do it? It was also very simple, because sages themselves were immortal existences, especially sages of the Great Path. Even if they died, they could be reborn from the origin of the Great Path. Therefore, if sages were tainted with karma and didn't pay it back and let the power of karma explode, they would at most be unlucky for a period of time. The real disaster would be faced by their disciples. If they were careless, the entire sect would be overturned. Otherwise, the Western sex Urshi wouldn't have been so active in the investiture of the gods. The Western sect had also been crazily recruiting believers, with the purpose of making the Western sect stronger. As long as there were more people, even if the power of karma exploded, everyone wouldn't die together. How many people who believed in Buddhism suffered miserably? The Buddha annihilation movement wasn't just once or twice. Chapter 1140. The fundamental reason was that the 2 Buddhas of the Western sect had made great vows to become saints of the heavenly Tao. However, these 2 fellows were not moral role models. They could just casually make great vows. Wouldn't it be better for them to let their disciples face calamities and repay karma? Especially later on, the Western sect was even more extreme. Chanting the name of Buddha would allow one to obtain merit. Every time one chanted it, they would obtain merit. The most excessive thing was that even chanting the name of Buddha had standards. According to the records in the Buddhist scriptures, the better the prayer beads and Buddha statues one bought, the more merit one would obtain from chanting the name of Buddha. Wasn't this obviously a scam? Putting aside the matter of the fake monks amassing wealth, just the matter of obtaining merit, how could there be such a good thing in the world? If merit was so easy to obtain, then what was the purpose of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors doing everything for the prosperity of the human race? They were dumber than you. Didn't they know that chanting the name of Buddha would allow them to obtain merit? Chanting the name of Buddha was actually helping others share the burden of disaster. Apart from the stories that were made up to deceive people, these innocent believers rarely had good endings. It was the norm for their families to be destroyed. In fact, in some movies and TV series, it was very common for criminals to kill the believers who chanted the name of Buddha and then stain the Buddha statue with blood. The criminals then walked away. This Yu Jiang, Shanqing Tianzuan, could not tell how well he had learned the methods of the Western sect. However, he was very familiar with the methods of the Western sect. He had the demeanor of a grandmaster. At the same time, Hamba, who was also watching the battle, reached out his hand to support his forehead. The power of chi and blood in his body kept on surging. His lips opened and closed, but he could not make a sound for a long time. However, if one knew how to read lips, they could easily read 4 words: family misfortune. As for the furious Lin Yuan, he could not help but be slightly stunned. At this time, he really could not find any words to describe Yujia. How awesome, brother! In his previous life, Lin Yuan wasn't considered to be the son of an aristocratic family. He could only say that his family's environment was not bad, and his own ability was not bad. After taking over his family's business, his social status began to rise. He had seen a lot of famous people in the business world and influential bigwigs. Due to his age, he had also come into contact with a lot of second-generation heirs. Compared to those second-generation heirs in urban novels who would clamor until their families were destroyed for the sake of a woman or a bit of face, the second-generation heirs had all received elite education. Even if there weren't many of them who were extremely shrewd at a young age, they were still able to talk well and advance and retreat naturally. To them, they didn't care about background or wealth. They only cared about ability and structure. Not to mention losing a little face. As long as you could bring value to them, it wouldn't be a problem for them to stretch their faces out for you to slap. However, Lin Yuan did not expect that the first time he met someone with cerebral palsy, he would turn out to be a mythical figure. Big brother, don't you know where you are when you speak? What was your attitude before? You were arrogant and contemptuous, and you even attacked when you said you wanted to. Now that you've found out that there was a problem, you want to use your background to suppress people? Your F***king trick might not even work in the mortal world, let alone in the cultivation world. What kind of place was the cultivation world? It was a place where the law of the jungle was played out in blood. If you don't eat people, people will eat you. If you want to live forever and be strong, you have to start fighting with your life every time you open your eyes. Background? That thing was only useful when you were chatting. If there was a conflict of interest, would people dump you? I'm a ruthless person who will fight with Hongjun sooner or later. Even if the Western Second sure came, I would still fight, let alone someone with your identity. Before Lin Yuan could answer, there were already people who couldn't hold back anymore. In the distance, 3 conveyance lights came together, and they didn't reveal themselves until they were near Shunning City. An old Taoist in a brown Taoist robe rode a green ox in the air. His hair and beard were pale, and his skin was wrinkled and ugly. It was almost impossible to recognize his original appearance. The momentum of his body was also looming. Sometimes he looked like a mortal without cultivation, and sometimes he was unfathomable, as if he could destroy the world at any time. A handsome middle-aged scholar with a jade-like face, wearing an emerald green robe, walked towards Shunning City with his hands behind his back, as if he was taking a stroll in a courtyard. However, every step he took, he crossed at least 1,000 feet, and ink-colored characters flashed around him from time to time. Just by looking at him, one would feel that a scholar should have such a temperament. It was a young monk wearing a moon-white monk robe. In terms of appearance alone, he was even more handsome than the middle-aged scholar. His red lips and white teeth made people unable to help but feel tender affection for him, especially his clear black and white eyes, which seemed to contain all the truth of the world. No matter how time passed, how the seas dried up and the rocks rotted, it was not enough to cause the slightest ripple in his eyes. Sure, Tao, Ru. The gurus of the 3 families gathered at the northern frontier. Not only did these 3 people look extraordinary, but any one of them could be a powerful figure who could suppress an era. The old Taoist was Bu Xingzhou, the immortal lord. He joined the Yingtian Temple of the Myriad Swords dynasty 3,500 years ago, but he didn't make any progress for 30 years. However, he comprehended Tao overnight, and the whole world knew about it. Since then, the Yingtian Temple jumped from a third-rate school to a super first-rate school. Even if there were no successors, no one could shake their position. Even if they met a mighty figure like Lei Qiusheng, the Yingtian Temple, which was built on the side of the imperial capital, could only adopt the strategy of lying on the side of the bed and letting others sleep soundly. The deeds of the middle-aged scholar in his early years could no longer be investigated. It was possible to say that he was from any dynasty. During the period from 4,000 to 3,500 years ago, the middle-aged scholar's shadow was behind the power changes of the seven dynasties. Nowadays, when the Confucian cultivators saw him, they had to respectfully call him patriarch, and his title was like thunder to the ears. Song Xuebua, the imperial tutor of the seven dynasties, was also the undisputed #1 expert of the Bustling continent. However, the two of them had never fought before, so it was still a mystery as to who was stronger. It was also a topic that the Taoist sect and the Confucian sect often discussed and cursed each other. As for the white-robed monk, he was known as the immovable wisdom king, Kong Xiang, the godly monk. 7,000 years ago, a godly monk appeared in the world. Therefore, in the history that swept across the Tianwu world, Kong Xiang was not the most powerful person in Buddhism. However, 100 years ago, Kong Xiang came out of seclusion at Mount Shaoi of the Chuyan dynasty and wiped out the southern wasteland demon range. Even the demon venerable of the southern wasteland was afraid of him and didn't dare to confront him directly. Otherwise, the Chuyan dynasty would have been nibbled into an empty shell by the southern wasteland demon range. Looking back, Kong Xiang could be considered the most powerful person who suppressed an era for the shortest time, because a few years ago, Black Jiao appeared and took over the title of era-suppressing monster in less than 3 years. Chapter 1141. This wave is a grudge game. The enmity between Bu Xingzhou and Song Xuebua had been discussed by people for 4,000 years. Although the two kings didn't meet, it involved the conflict between the Taoist schools and the Confucian schools. Even if they didn't meet, once they did meet, there would be a world-shaking battle. Although Kong Xiang's reputation was not resounding, he was still an expert who had suppressed the world for 97 years. There were grudges between him and Lin Yuan. If not for the appearance of the Black Jiao in the northern frontier, Kong Xiang would still be the #1 expert in the world, spreading the teachings of the Cloud Empire. But now, when the name Kong Xiang was mentioned by low-level cultivators and demonic beasts, they would all be shocked. But in the eyes of the guardians of the Heavenly Gate, Kong Xiang was simply a joke. Even Song Xuebua, the ruthless person who had stirred up the 7 great empires, had suppressed the world for 500 years before being surpassed by Bu Xingzhou. Looking at Kong Xiang, he had suppressed the world for 97 years. Even a generation of mortals could not be sent away. After all, the spirit qi in the Tianwu world was abundant. Mortals could easily live up to 100 years. If they cultivated a few martial arts, they could live up to 150 years. Fortunately, there was no such thing as entertainment reporters in Tianwu world. Otherwise, if news of these 3 people appearing in the northern region were to spread, even if the 3 of them did nothing, the entertainment reporters would still be able to earn a lot of money. Moreover, what was going on in the northern frontier? They were fighting. Out of the blue, 3 peerless experts suddenly appeared. If you said that the 3 of them were just passing by, even an idiot would not believe it. Lin Yuan and Yu Jiang did not speak. Even if Yu Jiang acted a little retarded, he had actually seen the world. The current atmosphere was so tense that even the cultivators in the northern frontier had to hold their breaths, afraid that the 2 experts who were fighting would take their anger out on them. Not to mention 3 almighty experts who came from other places and whose cultivation was not any weaker than them. This clearly showed that they did not come with good intentions. Kill demons? Bu Xingzhou said indifferently. Subdue demons? Kong Xiang's face was filled with pity. For the sake of the people. Then came Song Xuebua's gentle voice. Cultivation was indeed a very mystical thing. In fact, when these 3 people spoke, they didn't have any expressions or emotions, but people could feel different temperaments from them. For example, Bu Xingzhou's down nature, Song Xuebua's scholarly elegance, and Kong Xiang's Tao of compassion. However, after the 3 of them finished speaking, the pressure immediately shifted to Lin Yuan. Regardless of whether he was a demon or a devil, it was actually very vague. However, it was very clear that Lin Yuan could also be classified as a type of demon. Yu Jiang, which was clearly different from humans, could also be classified as a type of demon. As for Song Xuebua, he was much more straightforward. His words of establishing a life for the people clearly showed that he was dissatisfied with the rule of the northern frontier. However, that was normal. Although the Martial Heaven World's Confucian sect was far inferior to the Chaos World's Confucian sect, there were still some principles that could be passed down from generation to generation. For example, establish a heart for heaven and earth, establish life for the people, inherit the lost techniques of the past sages, establish peace for all ages. As for the Confucian sect, it had always liked to use moral coercion and double standards. That was especially true of the Confucian sect of the Tang and Song dynasties. They had shouted the slogan of upholding the heavens, extinguishing human desires. However, they had forcibly used the thinking of the Confucian ancestors to compare with others. On the other hand, they only required others to be saints, but they themselves had never been saints. What aristocratic families were supposed to do, these people who boasted that they had read the sages' books hadn't missed a single one. However, Lin Yuan didn't dislike this kind of Confucian sect. At most, they would distort the words of Kong and Ming, two sages. They would remove the latter part of the sentence, repay evil with good. How should one repay good? And force others to do it. However, the Confucian sect of the past had focused on accepting the mandate of the heavens or the authority of the gods. They were crazily reversing history, wishing they could return to the era of the Zhou dynasty and trample the hard work of successive generations of human kings beneath their feet. The Martial Heaven world was an incomplete world. Naturally, its struggles weren't that intense. The Confucian sect also didn't pay attention to that. However, this imperial tutor of the seven dynasties was clearly unhappy that Lin Yuan was the true ruler of the northern frontier. This time, he had come to the northern frontier specifically to cause trouble for Lin Yuan. Hidden within the thunderclouds, Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. He sneered, "All of you normally don't show your strength, but now you've all jumped out. What? Do you think I don't know how to breathe? Or are you saying that I've already lost, so you can hit me while I'm down?" Three experts whose realms had reached the limit of the Martial Heaven world, as well as the Almighty from the Yuran wilderness, were placed in front of Lin Yuan. Practically everyone believed that the northern frontier's Dragon King, who had been invincible since he had been born, had already lost. After a moment, two more streaks of light appeared. Cyan-robed evil spirit Guda Ming was a top-notch assassin from the Azure River Empire. He always wore a demonic beast mask that didn't resemble anything. Ever since he had made his debut, he had lived for more than 300 years. There were three things he wouldn't kill. He wouldn't kill the weak, he wouldn't kill the old, he wouldn't kill the women and children. However, other than these three things, everyone who was targeted by Guda Ming, regardless of their realm or status, would die. Demon Master Liang Mang, Wei Li was also from the Azure River Empire. However, he wasn't an assassin. Instead, he was from a proper sect. He was the sect leader of the Heaven Extermination sect, a first-rate sect in the Azure River Empire. It was the largest demonic sect in the Azure River Empire. However, he was different from the demonic disciples who cooperated with the Sky Demon. Although Wei Li cultivated demonic techniques, he fought with the righteous path, which was a little similar to the Azura path. At the same time, he was also a sect that ordinary people whose aptitude wasn't recognized by ordinary sects but who wished to cultivate yearned to join. However, the days of the Heaven Extermination sect weren't too good. Just like the name of the sect, this group of people specialized in going against the guardians of the Heavenly Gate. Why are all the Tom, Dick, and Harry jumping out these days? Wei Li stared fiercely at the three people who had appeared before him and said in a disdainful tone. Although Guda Ming didn't say anything, he unsheathed his sword and pointed it at Buxing Zhou and the other two. His killing intent was biting cold. Obviously, these two peak corrupt Dao experts from the Azure River Empire weren't on the same side as the three peak corrupt Dao experts who had come on behalf of Shurdaru. It was even to the extent that these two peak corrupt Dao experts had appeared here just to ambush these three peak corrupt Dao experts. Another two whistles sounded. Inari god Kagura and war god Badu appeared one by one outside Shunning City. Their eyes were cold as they looked at Yu Jiang. TSK, Lin Yuan suddenly sneered. He squinted his eyes and said, 5 against 4. It seems like some people can't bully us with numbers. Chapter 1142. Bu Xingzhou and the other two had made an appointment to go to the north this time because they had been approached by some big shot and received a reward in advance that they didn't want to refuse, but also didn't dare to refuse. The three of them had been hiding in the northern frontier for a while and hadn't found a chance to make a move. After all, the Black Jiao's invincible aura was a huge deterrent to them. They couldn't forget the scene of the Black Jiao killing the two Archfiend Kings, even if they wanted to. They originally thought that they wouldn't be able to get anything good out of this trip to the northern frontier and were prepared to take out all their resources to fight the Black Jiao head-on. However, they didn't expect that an unknown expert would suddenly appear to fight the Black Jiao. That was why they couldn't wait to jump out. In the end, the Black Jiao actually invited help in advance. Even if the three of them were called era suppressors, it was just people giving them face. The real big shots had always been hidden from the world. Compared to the so-called fame, they cared more about their own benefits. Therefore, the famous didn't necessarily mean that they were invincible. If you really wanted to judge whether someone was strong or not, you had to look at what they had done. Needless to say, Du Gumming was the #1 assassin in the world. Those experts who were known as the era suppressors had more than one fallen by Du Gumming's hands. In the assassin industry, Du Gumming had always been respected as the ancestor. If the three of them were to be targeted by Du Gumming alone, their chances of survival would probably not exceed 30%. As for Wei Li, he was even more terrifying. Only cultivators and mortals below the void netherworld realm would feel that the 7 empires were unshakable existences. Even a second-rate sect was a colossal existence to cultivators at this level. However, cultivators and Yao beasts above the void netherworld realm all knew that the strength of those clans and sects was not purely based on their foundation. It also depended on whether or not they had a big shot behind them. For example, the Qiao family on the northern frontier was a family that had existed for 1,000 years. However, in Lin Yuan's hands, they were like a child's toy. That was because the Qiao family seemed powerful, but they didn't have a single cultivator above the void realm. This was why Lin Yuan didn't show any mercy when dealing with the traitorous Qiao family. Traitors, she hated traitors the most in her life. As for the big shots of the world, they were the true rulers of the Heaven Martial World, the protectors of the Heaven Gate. In the Heaven Martial World, there were many people who dared to go against the Heaven Martial World, but those who survived could be counted with one's fingers. For example, Lei Qiuxing could be said to be a bloody example. He had only disobeyed the orders of the protectors of the Heaven Gate, and he hadn't even offended the upper echelons, but it had caused the 4 great powers to join hands to encircle and annihilate the Xinwu dynasty. If he had offended the true upper echelons, they could single-handedly flatten the Xinwu dynasty. Shadow Demon Su Yin, Northern Frontier Black Jiao, Qingjiang Wei Li. In the entire world, only these 3 dared to humiliate the protectors of the Heaven Gate. Furthermore, they could still live well after doing so. Thus, when Wei Li opened his mouth to curse, Bu Xingzhou and the other 2 didn't even dare to speak up. The only thing they were puzzled about was why Wei Li and Du Gumming would appear in the northern frontier. Furthermore, why did they have to support the Black Jiao? Lin Yuan smiled, but didn't say anything. With the territory model coupled with the Eye of God, other than the 3rd prince who had suddenly appeared in Shunning City under the care of Yu Jiang, Bu Xingzhou and the other 2 had nowhere to hide. As mentioned before, the northern frontier was currently standing on a dividing line. If the plan was carried out smoothly, swallowing the other empires and unifying the Heaven Martial continent would be just around the corner. However, if the plan wasn't carried out smoothly, the great situation of the northern frontier would be ruined in one of the following battles. Thus, Lin Yuan couldn't help but be sensitive. Towards the 3 peak experts who had suddenly appeared, he naturally took care of them. Even the peddlers near the inn where the three were staying were secretly changed to people from the association of the Demon Emperor. As expected, wasn't this jumping the other way round? Although Lin Yuan was confident in his own strength, he wouldn't gamble with the foundation of the northern frontier. Although the appearance of Yu Jiang had surprised him, the situation was still within his control. Du Gumming wasn't difficult to invite. As long as he could find his whereabouts and promise him the rewards he wanted, a peak expert directly joined the camp of the northern frontier. Other than the population base, the conditions of the northern frontier were actually much better than the other empires. This time, in order to invite Du Gumming, Lin Yuan was even more ruthless. He suspended all the projects that could be suspended and used a shocking amount of resources to hire this peak assassin. As for Wei Li, that was an unexpected surprise. This was because in the original plan, Lin Yuan, Kagura, Badu, and Du Gumming would fight against Buxing Zhou and the other two. Unexpectedly, Wei Li was actually able to maintain the attitude of going against the Heavenly Gate Protector and directly followed Du Gumming to the northern frontier. Wei Li didn't mention anything about rewards. It was probably due to the personality of the Demon Dao. In short, there was a saying, "No amount of gold can buy my happiness." This time, Wei Li's goal in coming to the northern frontier was to make the Heavenly Gate Protector unhappy. If the Heavenly Gate Protector was unhappy, he would be happy. I will delay the Black Jiao. The three of you quickly kill Du Gumming and Wei Li. Buxing Zhou's old face that was like a withered tree bark turned serious. His right hand shook slightly and a pitch-black wooden stick was thrown out. Some sharp-eyed cultivators instantly exclaimed, "Lightning Severing Branch, the sect treasure of Ying Tian Temple." Legend had it that Ying Tian Temple was actually called Defying Tian Temple a few thousand years ago. This black wooden stick was the treasure that the founder of the sect had once comprehended Tao on the Endless Sea. In the end, he attracted the heavenly punishment Lightning Tribulation. He casually plucked a peach tree to face the heavenly punishment Lightning Tribulation. After 3 days, the founder stepped into the state above the Void Realm. His clothes were spotless. Only the peach tree that he plucked was struck into a pitch-black wooden stick by the heavenly punishment Lightning Tribulation and transformed into a magic treasure that contained the power of the heavenly punishment Lightning Tribulation. It was said that the Defying Tian Temple used this lightning severing branch as a treasure to stabilize their fate. What was more terrifying was that the Defying Tian Temple only changed its name to Ying Tian Temple when it was passed down to Buxing Zhou. Before Buxing Zhou rose, many people once said that Buxing Zhou didn't have any cultivation talent at all. Even if he cultivated his entire life, he wouldn't be able to break through the mortal evolution state. In reality, this was indeed the case. Buxing Zhou wasted nearly 100 years in Ying Tian Temple. His lifespan was almost up, and he was plagued with illness. However, because of a strange dream, he had an epiphany and became the immortal true lord of today. Ever since Buxing Zhou had made a name for himself, he had used formations, talismans, flying swords, and spells in fights. However, he had never seen Buxing Zhou take out a supreme treasure like the thunder-severing branch before the fight officially began. In a sense, Buxing Zhou was planning to fight with his life on the line. I wish all the readers a happy Children's Day and a carefree life forever. Chapter 1143. If the severing lightning branch was destroyed, Ying Tian Guan's luck would directly dissipate. Even if a peerless genius entered the sect, it would be destined to be difficult for them to cultivate, unless they could obtain another treasure to suppress their luck. However, the possibility of obtaining another treasure was too small. Just like the sects in the world today, the overlords were still the original ones. Those small and medium-sized sects that did not have any treasures to suppress their luck were more relaxed. Their rise and fall was up to fate. It was possible for a peerless genius to appear only for a short time, and then for hundreds or thousands of years, the sect would be destroyed. This Buxing Zhou, Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly. He was more and more certain that someone was targeting him from behind. Otherwise, Buxing Zhou and the other two did not have much interaction with each other. and it was impossible for them to come to the northern frontier to deal with him. Battles between top experts rarely happened, because once both sides fought, they would use all their trump cards. They would not rest until they killed the other side. Therefore, at most, they would have some verbal conflicts. If you give me face, I will give you a way out. In the end, nothing was settled. In any case, the cultivators in the sky martial world did not even dare to pursue higher realms. They only wanted to live a peaceful life. If these three people simply did not like him, they would have already taken action to suppress him. In the sky martial world, cultivators and demonic beasts like to find opponents of similar realms to fight. The main reason was that they did not want their juniors to become the prey of the strong while they were killing the weak. However, the protectors of the Heavenly Gate did not have such concerns about the northern frontier. They did not dare to touch Lin Yuan because they were afraid of the ancient demon court. Now, they were afraid of the background behind Lin Yuan that was even more terrifying than the ancient demon court. Otherwise, someone like Lin Yuan, who did not respect the protectors of the Heavenly Gate, would have been killed by them long ago. They came to the northern frontier to cause trouble, most likely because someone asked them to. As soon as he made a move, he directly put the fate of his own sect on the line. However, it didn't create much of a tragic and unyielding atmosphere. Instead, it made Lin Yuan even more certain that they were just hired thugs, and the other party was giving them benefits that they couldn't refuse. With the existence of the Willow Branch, Yu Jiang didn't dare to waste his energy to summon the 24 Heavens Phantoms again. Instead, he summoned gusts of plague wind and took the initiative to welcome Kagura and Batu. Very obviously, although he felt that Lin Yuan's idea was more difficult to deal with, he didn't put the gods of the northern frontier conferred by Lin Yuan in his eyes. He directly went up to fight 1 against 2 without any fear. Kong Xiang put his palms together. Golden Buddhist light erupted from his body. Although he didn't attack, he was still staring at Wei Li. The Buddhist inheritance of the martial heaven world wasn't perfect. It wasn't like the Western sect of the Great Desolate World. Those who could defeat them were called glaring Vajra, and those who couldn't defeat them were called low-browed bodhisattvas. The Buddhist inheritance of the martial heaven world mainly focused on the word suppression. Even when facing a great demon like Wei Li, although Kong Xiang knew that he wasn't a match for him, he still had some confidence in stalling Wei Li. At this moment, the pressure was undoubtedly on Song Xuebua. Because the person this imperial preceptor of 7 dynasties wanted to deal with was Du Gumming. If he could defeat Du Gumming in a short period of time, then everything would be fine. No matter if it was his helper Bu Xingzhou or Kong Xiang, he would have the upper hand. But if he couldn't defeat Du Gumming, then sorry, once Kong Xiang was killed by Wei Li, then it wouldn't be a 4 against 5 situation anymore. Lin Yuan's gaze turned. He stared at the lightning branch in Bu Xingzhou's hand and said, "Old Taoist, you're smart. Seeing that the northern frontier is covered by thunderclouds, you took out a magic treasure that contains the power of lightning punishment. Firstly, you're relying on this item to restrain my lightning technique. Secondly, fighting in this kind of environment will strengthen your magic treasure to a certain extent. Your plan is pretty good. No wonder you dare to face this king alone." After being mocked by Lin Yuan, Bu Xingzhou's old face was instantly embarrassed. Indeed, he saw that Lin Yuan had already set up the battlefield, so he decided to stall Lin Yuan alone. This was because using the lightning branch in such an environment was like having heavenly help to him. If he did it well, he might even be able to use Lin Yuan's lightning technique to harm himself. That was indeed the case. However, the problem was that one shouldn't hit someone's face when fighting and shouldn't expose someone's shortcomings when scolding. What the hell did you mean by saying it out loud? Although Bu Xingzhou usually considered himself as a transcendent realm, he was very clear that the so-called transcendent realm was still stuck in the sovereign realm. It was just that the divine power accumulated was much more than the ordinary sovereign realm. Even if he cultivated to the peak of the sovereign realm step by step, he wouldn't be able to compete with these transcendent realm experts. However, no matter what, his true realm was still higher than Lin Yuan. In the end, he was described in such a manner. It was as if he didn't have the lightning branch. He wouldn't dare to face Lin Yuan alone. All right, he really didn't dare to. After all, the Black Jiao's invincibility in the northern frontier was too deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Lin Yuan, who was hidden in the thunderclouds, narrowed his eyes slightly and sneered, "But the problem is, who told you that I'm going to use lightning techniques?" Hearing this, Bu Xingzhou's heart suddenly sank. Just like what Yu Jiang said before, the flying clouds and summoning rain was originally the Dragon Clan's magical ability. However, it was actually used to scare people. The so-called lightning and rainstorm were simply a joke to cultivators. Even Heavenly Dipper Realm cultivators could directly ignore it, unless something was done in the thunderstorm. However, since the Black Jiao became famous, he had fought many battles. However, who had seen this Black Jiao use lightning techniques? Too careless. TSK. Bu Xingzhou's face was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. He glared at Lin Yuan angrily, as if he was a mute who had eaten Chinese gold thread. This Black Jiao created such a big scene, such as a rainstorm and thunderclouds. In the end, he didn't intend to use lightning techniques at all. "Aren't you playing with me?" Lin Yuan poked his head out from the thunderclouds and sneered. "Do you know, from the moment you appeared in the northern frontier, a group of Knight Bujiao's cavalry quietly set out. I reckon that they are near the Ingtian temple by now. I gave them the order that once the northern frontier changes, they are to immediately kill everyone in the temple. All the branch families, derivative families, and even the secular disciples are not to be spared. In other words, from the moment you all arrived at the northern frontier, this king planned to exterminate all of you." The torrential rain poured down, and the thunderclouds shrouded the area. Although Bu Xingzhou couldn't see how sinister Lin Yuan's expression was, he could read the endless cold killing intent from the pair of indistinct blue and white eyes. This Black Jiao was serious. "Black Jiao, you despicable." After holding back for a long time, Bu Xingzhou's face turned red. In the end, he could only curse the word despicable. Because Lin Yuan's move to kill Ingtian Guan was simply a bad move from a macro perspective, but it did indeed hit Ingtian Guan's vital point. Chapter 1144. Why was this a bad move from a macroscopic point of view? Previously, there had been frequent incidents in the northern frontier because the Sky Demon had confronted the northern frontier. This had attracted a large number of effective forces from the northern frontier and caused them to neglect the supervision of the rear. This allowed the shadow demon Su Yin, the Rising Clouds dynasty, the venerable demon of the southern wasteland, and other forces to stir up trouble, causing the entire northern frontier to be in chaos. Although Lin Yuan's return from the Endless Sea was a boost, it had no effect on the overall situation. If the Sky Demon had not suddenly given up on confronting the northern frontier for some reason, the northern frontier would not have been able to solve the problem of the Hengduan Mountains. Even the Immortals would have been able to cause trouble for the northern frontier. But what was Lin Yuan doing now? The situation had not stabilized, but he had sent people to the area occupied by the Sky Demon. If this was not provoking the Sky Demon, what was it? If the Sky Demon was really provoked by the northern frontier and turned back to attack the northern frontier, then Lin Yuan would have to spit out everything he had taken. He might even have to pay an even more painful price in order to stabilize the situation at the northern frontier. "Aren't you afraid that the Sky Demon?" Bu Xingzhou glared at him angrily. He felt as if a mouthful of blood was stuck in his chest, and he could not calm it down. There were still many sects and families in the Central Plains. It was not that they had joined forces with the extraterrestrial demons, but that these sects and families had the backing of the Elysium Guardians. They were an important source for the Elysium Guardians to absorb the power of incense. Therefore, after the outbreak of the extraterrestrial demons, many of the Elysium Guardians deliberately returned to their sects, either to set up a formation or personally suppress the extraterrestrial demons. This was the only way to preserve their inheritance. More importantly, there were some special resources in the territories of these large forces. These were things that they could not part with, so naturally, they would not move them at will. In fact, there were similar sects and families in the south. Lin Yuan's plan in the south was not to directly move the entire south. At most, it would be to the point of emptiness. The top forces in the south were eager to do this and annexed a large number of territories without bloodshed. However, when he came to the northern frontier this time, although he had set up formations and trump cards to resist the Sky Demon, they could only defend against the Sky Demon. If an external power attacked or someone destroyed the formations from the inside, they did not even need to do anything. They could just leave after destroying the formations. The Wandering Sky Demon would be able to kill everyone in the Ying Tian Guan Temple. This was a move that truly hit his vital point. Territory was very important to the Ying Tian Guan Temple, but to him, he only cared about how many disciples and grand disciples could provide him with incense power to convert into divine power to extend his life. If these people were all massacred by the northern frontier, and he had used up a large amount of divine power in the northern frontier, even if he could defeat the Black Jiao, he would very quickly die from the exhaustion of his lifespan. In other words, regardless of whether it was true or not, since the Black Jiao had brought it up, he could only treat it as if it was true. Although the benefits given by that big shot were tempting, compared to his own little life, no reward was worth it. After a moment of silence, Bu Xingzhou slowly lowered the thunder-severing branch in his hand. He bitterly smiled and said, "Black Jiao, you win. I know you have a way to contact your people and have them stop. I can turn the muzzle to help you deal with Kong Xiang and Song Xuebua." Huh? Lin Yuan suddenly laughed. Before his laughter died down, his eyes were still filled with ruthlessness. "Bastard, you all King think that the northern frontier is a soft persimmon that you can pinch whenever you want. Now that you've found out that the persimmon is not ripe, you want to run away?" With a thought, the scales on his body turned from black to gold, straightening his body. Lin Yuan's eyes gradually wiped away the emotions in them. He still breathed weakly, but it was as if he had turned from a living dragon into a dead creature. In his previous life, for the sake of revenge, he had trained himself almost like a masochist. Other than various unorthodox methods, he had also dabbled in Chinese martial arts. Compared to the nimble and graceful sword and the indomitable blade, Lin Yuan still preferred spear techniques. This was because the stronger the spear, the longer the spear. Although he had also trained in firearms abroad, he knew very well that his enemies would not wait for him in an open space with a wide field of vision. In the end, the deciding factor of success or failure was still close combat. Although spear techniques would be affected by the indoor environment, his enemies would not stay in an area that was 10 square meters or a few square meters. Compared to the sword and blade techniques, spear techniques were more suited to his requirements. If his enemies were standing far away and took out their guns, he could still attack them within a few steps if he held them. If it was a sword or a blade, could it be that he could use the Imperial Sword technique? He had trained in the Six Harmonies Great Spear, Ba Ji Spear, and other spear techniques. He had also trained in the Yu Clan Spear and Yang Clan Spear while in the horse stance. Fitting in with the roaming dragon's 9 transformations, Lin Yuan's understanding of ancient martial arts from his previous life had also increased by several levels. In a situation where his lightning techniques were clearly restrained, Lin Yuan planned to use his spear techniques to properly deal with this air suppressor expert. As for where did the spear come from? He himself was the spear. Coupled with the third-person view activated by the Eye of God, Lin Yuan's body at this moment turned into a great spear, as if he was being held by an invisible person and pointed at Bu Xingzhou. Bu Xingzhou's figure slightly paused, his face filled with doubt. He could not feel the flow of demonic energy in Lin Yuan's body, nor could he predict how Lin Yuan would deal with him. At this moment, he felt as if he was being stared at by something extremely terrifying. "Kill!" Following a roar, Bu Xingzhou suddenly felt a shadow flash in front of his eyes. He subconsciously dodged to the side and at the same time raised the Severing Thunder Branch to meet it head-on. Ding ding dang dang. The Severing Thunder Branch and the Flood Dragon's tail constantly collided, producing a series of metal-clanging sounds. Vaguely, one could even see the explosions of demonic energy and demonic energy. The golden scales on the Flood Dragon's tail constantly shattered, and the proficiency of the golden body's secrets began to decrease. The attribute drops began to increase, and the golden body secrets once again reached the peak level. During this process, the two sides would collide thousands or even tens of thousands of times in almost every breath of time. Good treasure. Lin Yuan retreated a little more than 10 meters, once again hiding in the thunderclouds, and opened his mouth to praise. What he had just used was the piercing word technique of the three major elements of spear techniques. Ordinary people who practice the piercing word technique, such as Swallow Flying Curtain, could be considered an expert. The great spear master of the Three Kingdoms era, Tong Yuan, was an expert in this field. His 100 birds worshipping the phoenix was 100 spears instantaneously. Although it was unknown how much of this 100 birds worshipping the phoenix was exaggerated by others, but if there really was someone who could achieve 100 spears instantaneously, then even Lu Bu, who was known as the #1 horse fighter of the era, would be pierced into a sieve in one round. It was just like how some Guishu experts could use cold weapons to cut or block bullets, but that was only for pistols. You want them to try using a cold weapon to meet a submachine gun head-on? Moreover, 100 spears per second could not even be considered a submachine gun. Even Ma Xiaoxin could only fire 600 spears per minute. With Lin Yuan's current attributes, using the piercing word technique and a heavy machine gun were no longer enough to describe his terrifying speed. When the two sides collided, there was even a gap in the rainstorm. It was simply unable to penetrate Lin Yuan's spear curtain. Chapter 1145. However, under such a terrifying spear curtain, Bu Xingzhou was barely able to keep up with Lin Yuan's rhythm, and he was able to take on the Zhao formula one by one. However, this was also the meaning of the question. After all, Bu Xingzhou was more than a realm higher than Lin Yuan. No matter how bad his basic attributes were, they wouldn't be lower than Lin Yuan's. He also had a lot of battle experience. If he couldn't even react to this, then the so-called era suppressor would be a joke. The only thing that caught Lin Yuan's attention was that lightning branch. Too hard, too hard. In that instant of collision, Lin Yuan spent at least 2,000 attribute points to maintain the strength of the Golden Body chant. However, he could repair his own injuries, but the lightning branch didn't have such an ability. In other words, his own defense combined with the buff of the Golden Body chant couldn't even shake the lightning branch. It didn't even cause a crack. This was enough to show how powerful this treasure was, as expected of the treasure that stabilized the sect's fate. However, Lin Yuan's eyes became fierce again. He moved and used the take word and suddenly hit Bu Xingzhou's wrist from bottom to top. Bu Xingzhou felt the pain and subconsciously wanted to let go. However, a thought flashed in his mind. He actually gritted his teeth and forcefully held onto the lightning branch that was about to leave his hand. When he looked at Lin Yuan again, his eyes were filled with shock. The heaven martial world didn't care about techniques. Most of the fights were just a straightforward exchange of blows. Even mortal evolution state martial artists mostly used the open tablet hand to fight. When he clashed with Lin Yuan before, he felt that Lin Yuan's fighting style was like a swallow flying through a curtain. There was no rhythm, but there seemed to be some kind of rhythm. Although he couldn't grasp that rhythm, he could still use his body and reflexes to forcefully receive it. However, when Lin Yuan attacked again, he suddenly changed his fighting style and almost caught him blind. He didn't dare to think that once he lost the severing thunder branch and encountered Lin Yuan's previous attack that was like a swallow flying through a curtain, what other way could he use to deal with it other than flying back and retreating? He could retreat, but if he retreated, he would lose the lightning branch. At that time, he would be even more miserable. The corners of Lin Yuan's mouth slightly widened as he looked at Bu Xingzhou with a sinister grin. There was an old saying in Huaxia, skills can approach the Tao, and skills can approach the gods. Humans had always had an inexplicable thirst for power. Before the heavenly connection, humans were extremely passionate about the Tao of cultivation. Any mighty figure who fought his way into the heavenly court could easily encounter hundreds of thousands of celestial soldiers and celestial generals. These celestial soldiers and celestial generals were not the orthodox immortals, but the powerful qi practitioners of the mortal world who were recognized by the heavenly court and obtained the immortal records that could extend their lifespans. Thus, they called themselves immortals. Later on, the path of cultivation declined, and the path of martial arts flourished. Southern fist, northern kick, and the 18 types of weapons prevailed all over the world. Even in Lin Yuan's previous life, when even martial arts had declined, there were still countless people who still had the dream of becoming a martial artist. After the path of cultivation was lost, if humans wanted to become strong, they had to continuously study all kinds of skills. When some skills reached a certain level, they could even reach the level of the Great Tao. Or it could be said that they were originally a type of Great Tao. Ancient martial arts is a skill that generations of outstanding people have continuously studied, pondered, and perfected after the path of cultivation has been cut off. The martial artists of the Tianwu world are inferior to the cultivators because these so-called martial artists are actually the lowest level of cultivators. The two originally belong to the same system. If the cultivation and physical quality are suppressed, the martial artists of the Tianwu world are simply incomparable to the martial artists of Lin Yuan's world. It can even be said that they are amateurs. Some ancient martial arts, even when used in a battle with cultivators, would not be at a disadvantage at all. After grasping a certain skill, Lin Yuan looked at the natives of the sky martial world and felt that they indeed had the qualifications to be proud. Die! Lin Yuan angrily roared. He still used his body as a spear and continuously collided with the severing lightning branch. His spear technique changed again and again. Bu Xingzhou, who had his wrist injured by Lin Yuan, complained incessantly. He once again began to doubt himself. Was his brain kicked by a donkey? Why did he give up on Badu and Kagura, who were clearly easier to bully, and insisted on fighting the Black Jiao one-on-one? Originally, it was Yu Jiang against the Black Jiao. In the end, his opponent was snatched away. Yu Jiang actually felt somewhat relieved. Now, he was suppressing Kagura and Badu with his own strength. Although he could not win the battle in a short period of time, he did indeed have the upper hand. On the other side, Song Xuebua, who could be said to be the hope of the entire village, silently looked at Du Guming. His lips opened and closed as he muttered to himself. A moment later, a 3-foot-long weasel hair brush appeared in his hand. His eyes narrowed slightly, and 2 drops of ink formed by Gang Qi dripped from the tip of the weasel hair brush. When the ink touched the ground, it transformed into 2 strong men like iron towers, standing guard in front of Song Xuebua. Du Guming slightly narrowed his eyes. The long sword in his hand slightly swayed. His clear black and white eyes could not hide the trace of disappointment in them. As an assassin, one must remember the iron rule. If one strike does not kill, flee 1,000 miles away. It was not a perverted requirement to kill the target in one strike. If one could not kill the target in one strike, he would not continue to fight and would immediately flee. But for an assassin, pursuing a one-strike kill was definitely not wrong. However, his experience told him that one strike would definitely not be able to kill Song Xuebua. If he used too much strength, he would instead be in danger of being counterattacked by Song Xuebua. It was clear that this was not the first time Song Xuebua had come into contact with a top assassin. Thus, from the moment Du Guming drew his sword, he had already prepared these 2 ink-stout men as guards. This was Wondrous Brush Blossoms, a supreme secret technique of the Confucian sect. Using one's true qi as ink, one could summon thousands of men and horses to charge and kill the enemy. If he had not grasped this secret technique, even if Song Xuebua had the ability to reach the heavens, he would not have been able to single-handedly stir up the winds and clouds of the 7 great empires. In the past, when the monarchs of the 7 great empires saw Song Xuebua, they all had to respectfully call him teacher. Just how awe-inspiring was this? Just a mere assassin, Song Xuebua bit his lips. His eyes revealed an unconcealable killing intent. The Confucian sect worshipped the saying that people are divided into 3, 6, and 9 ranks. Among them, not being able to punish a scholar official was the most important. Even if it was just a Xiuzai-level disciple, they could still not kneel in front of an official. From this, one could see how honorable the Confucian sect cultivators were. As for assassins, in the eyes of the Confucian sect, they could only be considered as the lowest of the low, the lowest of the low. Just being glanced at by Du Guoming made Song Xuebu want to take a few baths and scrub off a layer of skin on his body. Although he maintained a look of contempt on his face, under Du Guoming's gaze, Song Xuebu could still feel a chill run down his spine. Chapter 1146. The battle between Wei Li and Kong Xiang wasn't as intense as the others. It was mainly about silence. Kong Xiang and Wei Li had maintained their posture of standing and staring at each other until now. It seemed calm and peaceful, but both of their auras were firmly locked onto each other. Compared to a fist-to-flesh fight, this kind of game was even more dangerous. This was because if they revealed even the slightest flaw, then the other party's storm-like attacks would follow. Unless something unexpected happened, causing both parties to shake hands and make peace, they would have to maintain this kind of silence. Only one of them could leave alive. Kong Xiang put his palms together. His handsome face had a merciful expression. Buddhist light flowed in his eyes as he stared at Wei Li without moving. Wei Li crossed his arms in front of his chest. He had an obvious look of ridicule on his face, as if he was mocking this monk who overestimated himself. Stop looking. Even if you stare until your eyes are broken, you still won't be able to find a flaw in your grandfather's body. Wei Li's mouth was trash-talking, but his body obediently maintained a silent posture. He was always on guard against Kong Xiang. The monks of Buddhism all had one thing in common, and that was that they were especially difficult to deal with. This was especially true for monks who cultivated the suppress technique. There were even some who suppressed demons under the cliff and sat in their own bodies for thousands of years until the last trace of Buddhist aura was exhausted. Their corpses were then blown away by the mountain wind into powder and disappeared without a trace. They were ruthless people who had no complaints or regrets. Speaking of which, you came from Mount Shaui, right? Wei Li saw that Kong Xiang ignored him and started another topic. He said with a smile, "I do know a monk from Mount Shaui. His Buddhist name seems to be, what's it called? Oh, right, Cheng-Xian. That old monk was very interesting. He said that he was willing to sit in front of me for the rest of his life and use the supreme Buddhist Dharma to wash away my sins." Hearing the name, Cheng-Xian, Kong Xiang took a deep breath and said indifferently, and then, after that, I broke his limbs and threw him into the demonic beast forest to feed the demonic beasts. The corners of Wei Li's mouth curled up slightly. He took a deep breath and teased, "In my life, the thing I hate the most is you monks telling me to put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha on the spot. Even if there is such a thing, the one to become a Buddha should be that butcher's knife. After all, it was not willing to kill. It was the butcher who insisted on using it to kill, wasn't it?" Yes. Kong Xiang's face suddenly changed, and the benevolent look on his face disappeared. In the blink of an eye, his handsome face was completely filled with resentment and malevolence as he roared, "A person like you is indeed not worthy of listening to the story of lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha on the spot. What you lack is someone who will personally send you to meet Buddha." The Buddhist light dimmed, and a murderous aura filled the air. Although Kong Xiang's momentum was broken, Wei Li did not immediately make a move. Instead, he revealed a thoughtful look and said, "Could it be that you have never competed with that person for the title of the #1 person in Buddhism? It seems that you do have some self-awareness. You are indeed not worthy. Little monk, it seems that your master's death has dealt a huge blow to you. You are actually so angry that you even took the opportunity to enter the devil path, but..." Wei Li paused for a moment, and a large amount of black, evil aura whizzed out like a rushing river. In the blink of an eye, it formed a ferocious devil image that was more than 10 feet tall behind Wei Li. Its appearance was 70% similar to Wei Li, but it was much more ferocious and terrifying. When the devil image appeared, Wei Li's voice also became hoarse. "Little monk, since you have entered the devil path, you have to abide by the rules. The devil path does as one pleases. What rules are there? Although Kong Xiang's evil aura was not as strong as Wei Li's, his Buddhist power was still incomparably vigorous even though it was polluted. The flickering Buddhist light around him constantly collided with the evil aura overflowing from Wei Li's devil image. That's a lot. Today, I will teach you the first lesson. Respect your master. Wei Li's voice was low and hoarse, as if he was groaning, but also as if he was roaring. The rules of the devil path cannot be disobeyed. If you break the rules that day, you will have to pay the lightest price, which is your life. However, little monk, you are different. You are alone, and even your master has been killed by me. So no matter how angry I am, in the end, I will still kill you. You have profited. Dark green flames gradually spread out from Wei Li's body, together with the devil image behind him. It was as if an ancient great devil had broken out of its seal and was roaring towards the heavens, preparing to bring a calamity to the common people. Other than the almighty experts from the Great Desolation era, when the natives of the sky martial world saw this scene, regardless of their faction or realm, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. Ever since the void netherworld realm became human sovereigns, countless true experts went into seclusion. With the passage of time, the cultivators of the void netherworld realm gradually developed the style of a big shot, rarely personally taking action. Although the 7 great empires, the endless sea, and the 2 great demonic beast veins were all at war and seemed to be very fierce, in reality, all the empires were just small cats and there was nothing to see. However, this time in the northern frontier, a chaotic battle between 9 peak experts. Although it was exciting, there were only a few people who wished for them to really fight. Even some of the Heavenly Gate Guardians could not hold themselves back and planned to intervene. After all, with 9 peak experts taking action, even if the Black Jiao, Kagura, and Bada worked together to control the situation, they might not be able to protect the northern frontier. Although everyone wanted Black Jiao to die and the northern frontier to be destroyed, the conditions had to be reasonable. It should be known that once the northern frontier was destroyed, it meant that the agreement between the Heavenly Gate Guardians and the Sky Demon would lose its effect. At that time, the Sky Demon would run amok, and the few empires nearby would not be able to gain any benefits. Moreover, if the northern frontier was destroyed, who knew what kind of monster would appear from the remains of the northern frontier to take over the position of the northern frontier? That might be even more ferocious than the period when the Black Jiao ruled. Among the Heavenly Gate Guardians, the Shanqing Tianzun, whose code name was Tsang, waved his hand expressionlessly. Then, a few Heavenly Gate Guardians who were approaching the northern frontier immediately returned home. Some of the Heavenly Gate Guardians who were also preparing to set off also maintained their silence. This was the position of Tsang among the Heavenly Gate Guardians. He was a true top-level boss. Even many of the Heavenly Gate Guardians themselves did not know how many people in the organization were following Tsang for a living. After all, Tsang was one of the few who had established connections with other worlds and could promote exchanges of cultivation techniques or trade cultivation resources. Without Tsang as a bridge, the cultivation world of the Tianwu world would at least regress by more than 1,000 years. Now that the boss wanted to see the chaotic battle at the northern frontier, how could they, as errand boys, refuse? Chapter 1147. Pa! A crisp sound rang out. Lin Yuan and Bu Xing Zhou clashed, then separated. At this moment, the severing thunder branch was almost stained with golden blood. Any drop of it would be an excellent material for refining elixirs on the market. However, no one dared to be greedy enough to throw it out to collect the blood. Not to mention that the main characters were watching from the side. Just by looking at the atmosphere, one would know that the 9 people fighting were definitely the strongest in the world. Getting involved in this kind of battle, even 10 lives wouldn't be enough to save one's life. However, the blood wasn't the main point of Lin Yuan's attention. The main point was that Lin Yuan had used his body as a spear, crazily clashing with the lightning-severing branch at least 1,000,000 times. This almost masochistic behavior had finally caused a crack to appear on the supreme treasure that had been suppressing Ying Tianguan's destiny. Don't underestimate this sliver of a crack. The development of the unorthodox Tao in the Tianwu world couldn't be considered as flourishing. Only the regions near the Hunduan mountain range had more refiners. Only those demon slayers who had to fight against demonic beasts would spend large amounts of money to purchase various types of equipment. For demon slayers, if they were well prepared, then their safety would be more assured. It was also because of the existence of demon slayers that the northern frontier's refiners prospered. They had laid a good foundation for the current northern frontier's Ministry of Works. However, things like magical treasures were still unworthy existences in the Tianwu world. Although they could greatly increase the strength of the wielder, the natives of the Tianwu world were more willing to believe in themselves than in inanimate objects. Therefore, the refinement techniques were relatively backward. After so many years, there were only a few treasures that had been passed down from generation to generation. The magical treasures that could truly suppress the destiny of a sect weren't actually forged. Instead, they were existences similar to innate spiritual treasures. This type of naturally formed magical equipment actually had the characteristics of being completely natural and flawless. Therefore, the thunder-severing branch was either completely undamaged, or once a crack appeared, it meant that it couldn't hold on any longer. If it continued to collide at a high intensity, it was likely that before Bu Xingzhou was beaten to death, the thunder-severing branch would shatter into pieces. Black Jiao, you vicious beast! Bu Xingzhou thought for a moment. Then his expression suddenly changed, and he cursed. After all, the thunder-severing branch was a supreme treasure that was used to stabilize Ying Tianguan's luck. A treasure of this level could not be broken easily, let alone millions of hits, even if it was 100 million or 1 billion times. As long as Black Jiao could not shake Ying Tianguan's luck, the thunder-severing branch would remain intact. But now, the severed lightning branch had split open on its own, which undoubtedly meant one thing. The northern frontier had made a move against the Heaven Temple for a treasure that had accompanied him for thousands of years. Bu Xingzhou knew the thunder-severing branch like the back of his hand. He knew very well that the thunder-severing branch was not broken by Lin Yuan's tyrannical physical body. But when it was separated, the power of luck that wrapped around the thunder-severing branch dissipated, causing the magical treasure to split open on its own. It was a warning to him that Ying Tianguan had been targeted. As everyone knew, although the Black Jiao of the northern frontier was arrogant and challenged authority with every step he took, the Black Jiao had a strong point that most people could not do. And that was, he was a man of his words. Whether it was Ying Tianguan or defying Tianguan, if the Dragon King said that he would destroy your entire sect, then he would destroy your entire sect. Therefore, once the people of the northern frontier appeared near Ying Tianguan, there would be no survivors after the battle. At that time, where would he go to rebuild his orthodoxy and recruit enough disciples to provide him with the power of incense? Bu Xingzhou lowered his head slightly with a gloomy face. If not for the Black Jiao being so difficult to deal with, he even had the thought of paying a certain price to escape. But the problem was, the monk could run away, but the temple could not. Even if he ran away from the north today, it would not take long for the Black Flood Dragon to reach Ying Tian Temple. When that time came, where could he escape to? Unknowingly, he seemed to have been forced into a dead end. At the same time, Shenwu Dynasty, near the former imperial capital, Yi Belan led 2,000 cavalrymen, all of whom were wearing black armor and dark green robes. There were sabers at their waists, spears in their right hands, and sniper crossbows with a shooting range of more than 6,000 steps were hanging on their saddles. According to the experimental data of the Ministry of Works, such a steel crossbow could even kill a cultivator in the middle stage of Heaven Gang realm in an instant when it was about 2,000 steps away. Demonic beasts in the Mountain Lord realm might not be killed by the first arrow, but they would not be able to resist the second arrow. Moreover, after being hit by the first arrow, Even demonic beasts would not be able to stand up easily. Yi Balan let go of the reins with his left hand, held the spear in his hand upside down, and growled, "According to the map, Ing Tian Guan should be in the vicinity. It is a chaotic time, so it is normal for them to expand their territory. From now on, get ready for battle." Divide into 4 groups and search separately. If you meet the enemy's scouts, don't fight with them unless you are absolutely sure that you can kill all of them. Remember to hide your whereabouts well. When you get the exact information, gather at the predetermined place to discuss the next step. Speaking of this, Yi Balan touched his nose and grinned grimly. Today should be the first time for most of you to carry out a field mission. I think, from the day you enter the field, you should know what will happen if we fail. I'm afraid that it will be difficult to even gather a whole corpse. Furthermore, this time we're not simply here to complete the mission. We're here to warn those embroidered uniform guards who are getting more and more arrogant. Don't make it seem like we can't go out into the field. This is the final test that we've specially arranged for you. If anything goes wrong, you can forget about becoming an official member for the rest of your life. Yes, the 2,000 members of Butake Knight answered in a low voice. Their voices and intonations were extremely uniform and low enough. If one didn't carefully distinguish the difference between the accents, it would seem that they were the same person answering in a muffled voice. No one would simply treat this operation as a routine field operation by Knight Buyao, because from the moment Knight Buyao was established, it had always been an intelligence organization that stood side by side with the embroidered uniform guards. It was just that Knight Buyao was external, while the embroidered uniform guards were internal. The association of the Demon Emperor and the MI7 had taken away a certain amount of authority from these two organizations, forming a restriction on the two, but not threatening their positions. Butake Knight was originally an active ranger on the Frost Mirror Grassland. However, with the implementation of the Northern Frontier Plan, the Xuanjin dynasty now existed in name only. Butake Knight could continue to be active on the Frost Mirror Grassland, but its focus would begin to shift. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.